Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto and Erza child in fairy tale. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Kyoka Suigetsu Totsuka and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Prophecy Rebirth Chapter 1. In the tranquil continent of Earthland, a legend had almost faded with time and have become lost in history. Along with many other stories used to tell children at night, the tale of the elemental nations and the shinobi had become a distant memory in the minds of very little people. It would only exist as a telltale that would act as a fun activity for parents due to, with their children. No one knew that everything in the stories had actually happened. It has almost been 5,000 years already. It was surprising that people would still tell stories of the cursed people known as shinobi. But the various landmarks around Earthland would still have remains of the ancient civilization, but they would be the many scars left on the lands after the many cataclysmic battles that had taken place in the past. The shinobi were violent people, and their history was mainly filled with wars, but at their bitter end, a glimmer of light saved the world from complete destruction. No one knew the true name of the savior anymore, but out of all shinobi, this one man's existence stood up more than all others. This one man was the hero who stopped all wars during the shinobi era, and he alone sealed the monstrous origin of all power within himself to create peace in the world. Even after so many years, the story of the one hero continued to be told from parent to child. Although the legend of the one hero and the shinobi had almost been forgotten, it was clear that it was because of the hero that Earthland had the chance to exist. Everyone alive today owed that one man their lives. But hero's journey is not complete, there is still more to be done. In the peaceful land of Fiori, a woman walked through a busy street of a large town. She was a young woman, and her flowing scarlet hair and shapely body made her a vision to behold in the midst of many other people. Her brown eyes were casually staring forward down the street as she carelessly strolled along the crowd as if she was just another civilian. But it was obvious that she was not normal. The young woman was holding a giant horn over her head with only one hand, and it looked like she was not even trying. Men and women alike moved away from the beautiful woman like she was a monster, but the woman really didn't show a shred of discomfort. This was Erza Scarlet, one of the most powerful mage to walk the lands of Fiori, and belonged to one of the most infamous guilds in Earthland. Fairy tale. The moniker Titania was well known throughout the lands, and it was because of Erza's tremendous power that her name had almost become a legend. "I should rest up for the night," muttered Erza to herself as she looked up at the setting sun. Erza was glad that the weather was back to normal. For the past few days the climate around Fiori seemed to shift constantly. 3 days ago there was a rainstorm that resembled a monsoon, 2 days ago there was a major thunderstorm that spanned almost the entire area of Fiori, and just yesterday the sun seemed to have grown in size and turned the whole nation into a scorching pile of heat. After the several days of extreme weather, the many towns in Fiori were in distraught. The streets were flooded and were filled with debris of fallen buildings, and the extreme heat from a day ago caused a heavy fog to cover a very large area. It was until today that the weather had returned to normal. Erza had never experienced anything so peculiar as the weather inconsistency, and she had no explanation of how it could happen. It was on her list to ask about the strange events from her guild master when she got back to Fairy Tale. The S-class mage walked into a local inn and walked up to the counter. "Hi, I would like one room for the night please," said the young woman with a professional tone. The inn was fairly nice, it was a relatively old building, but it gave off a nostalgic sort of feeling. The lobby was also a small tavern where folks of the town would have dinner and have some drinks with friends. Erza made a note in her mind to have a nice dinner later before she turned in. The receptionist nodded with a smile. "Of course miss," replied the lady as she took Erza's money and offered her a room key. As she was about to walk up the stairs to her room, Erza overheard a table talking about the strangest things that had happened recently. The group of men were talking among each other and they all held a bottle of beer in their hands. "Yeah, I heard that things are really bad out in the countryside," exclaimed one man as he took a large swig from his bottle. Another older man nodded to his friend's words. "I heard that too, apparently the countryside was the place where the weather was the most severe," muttered the man with a few hiccups. "Some mages in the area are saying that that area is the focal point of whatever is causing the weather to change." The woman who appeared to be a girlfriend of one of the men also nodded her head in agreement. "Well, that would make sense as such crazy weather must be some sort of spell casted by a very strong mage for something." The waiter walked over to the table with a chuckle. "That's what a lot of people are saying, but that craziest thing is that a gigantic monolith suddenly sprung up from the ground. They say that it might be some sort of ancient ruin," said the man as he placed down more bottles of beer for the group. "People around the area are told to stay away from it for the while, just in case that it is dangerous." Erza closed her eyes and walked back out from the inn. After hearing what the group was saying, there was no way that she could just ignore it. From what she knew, the countryside is just a little out of the town, it should not take her long to reach it. Erza quickly rented a magical car from a nearby facility and connected herself into the SE plug. Somehow Erza had a feeling that there was something suspicious at the monolith and it must be something powerful if it can affect the weather so drastically. Erza channeled a lot of her self-energy into the car and she barreled out the city as fast as she could. The young woman haven't felt such urgency in a long time, for some reason there was just something about the strange events in the past few days that just greatly intrigued Erza. It took Erza about an hour of traveling until she saw a crowd of people surrounding an area and it was until she got a little closer that she saw that was a very large hole in the ground. It was probably over 300 feet in diameter and it looked seemingly endless when one would look down. The one thing that stood up the most was the gigantic monolith that filled most of the hole with its massive proportions. The large monolith was pure black and it gave off a mysterious aura. Erza really had never felt anything like it before. She got out of her car and started her way towards the crowd and she saw that most of them were from various guilds of Fiori. The groups were all discussing the strange phenomenon among themselves and didn't realize that one of the most powerful mages in Fiori just joined their company. The closer she got the more she felt the massive aura of power vibrating off the monolith in waves. Looking around, Erza saw that the surroundings were much more damaged than the towns, which was surprising since the towns were mainly damaged because of their tall buildings, but the countryside were almost all flat land, so the lightning shouldn't have done so much damage. Trees in the area were almost all burned to the ground and there were many deep trenches in the area that were caused by lightning hitting that area. The soil around them was still very wet from the extreme rainstorm a few days ago, but some higher ground had begun to crack from dryness because of the high heat just a day ago. Overall, the area looked horrid and it seemed that the weather had really been the most extreme in this area. What the hell is this thing and how did it cause such extreme weather changes? Thought Erza to herself as she crossed her arms. This aura feels so powerful but it is like nothing I have ever felt before. Erza headed closer towards the hole until she was right at the edge. Suddenly the ground began to shake with powerful turbulence that made standing in the area difficult. The many mages around the area were in shock as cracks began to appear along the ground and the foundation of the entire landmass was shaking. Erza's eyes widened as she was forced to jump back as the giant cracks began to split the earth into pieces. Mages in the area were all fleeing to the nearest safe spot with their magic, but some of them fell into the hole. The man landed a few meters behind Erza with panic in his eyes. "What the hell is going on?" cried the man as he continued to stagger back in shock. Erza staring at the monolith and was shocked to see that it was actually moving. "Get out of the area, that thing is moving," cried the woman as people around her nodded and jumped back. Erza was about to follow her own advice, but somehow she really wanted to see what was really behind the strange events and the monolith. The monolith started to move faster and cracks became larger around the area and the ground looked like it would give way soon. Erza glared at the gargantuan object as she channeled her magical power throughout her body. "Kariha no Yoroi," exclaimed the young woman as an armor that was black with silver trimming that had silver crosses at several places. It had a revealing silver-edged breastplate and plates flanking her hips that reached down to her waistguard. The waistguard left the front of Erza's body exposed, with her groin covered by a dark imbuement. She had large plates guarding her legs. She had two wings that had black metal arms acting as the wings' leading structure, but the parts used to fly were composed of a membrane-like material. The young woman jumped up with her armor as she stretched her wings out. Other mages under her looked on in shock as they saw the Titania fly up towards the large object. Erza charged towards the top of the monolith with a large blade in her hands. Since the monolith was still moving rather slowly, Erza easily hovered higher than it and she took her chance to land on top of it. But much to Erza's shock, the moment she landed on the monolith, a strange pattern of some sort of ancient letter appeared on the surface. "What now?" cried Erza as she looked around the area. The letters started to glow a bright blue as it circled Erza in an ear pattern and they soon part of the circle latched onto her leg. Erza slashed her blade down at the stream of letter in hopes of cutting herself free, but to her shock, her blade just faded through it as if it was intangible. Erza had no idea what was going on, she could feel the letters latching onto her, but her attacks wouldn't hit them whatsoever. More of the letters soon latched onto more of Erza's body, locking her arms against her torso tightly. Erza tried to break free using her blade, but she couldn't move a muscle. "Damn it," cursed the young woman as she struggled to breath. Erza's widened more as she saw that the top of the monolith was opening up and the same blue light was coming from inside the thing. Without any effort, the letters that trapped Erza pulled her into the monolith and as soon as she was in the opening closed up. Mages watched on in shock as they all saw Erza being pulled into the strange object, but there was no way that they would help. Erza was already captured. The monolith continued to emerge from the ground and it was just another few minutes before it was fully released from its underground confines. Where am I?" Though Erza to herself as she opened her eyes. Much to the powerful woman's shock, she was floating in the middle of some sort of plasma suspension. It was like she was submerged in water, but she could breathe as if she was on land and could hear as if it was open air. The suspension was transparent, but the same blue light from before was glowing on all sides, and it made the suspension look blue as well. The area was gargantuan. Erza couldn't see the end of the far end of the space. Seeing that she was still in one of her battle armors, Erza used her wings to swim closer to one direction while she looked around for any kind of exit. But suddenly she heard something. Erza looked back towards the other side of the space, which was where the sound was coming from. It was the sound of a baby crying. Erza was sure of it. Following sound of the baby, Erza swam to that direction, and as she got closer to the edge of the closest wall, she saw a small opening. It was shaped like a rectangle, and it was just large enough to Erza to walk through. When she was close enough, Erza reached towards the opening with her arm and found that it was open air. There was no suspension in the opening. Smirking to herself, Erza stepped into the opening and stood on her feet. To her surprise, none of the suspension was stuck to her clothes and that the opening like the start of a long hallway. But now the cries of the baby was much louder and Erza clearly heard that it was coming from the other end of the hallway. "This is just crazy," muttered Erza to herself as she ran down the hallway at her top speed. The walls of the hallway had the same weird letters as before and they were also glowing, but fortunately they were not moving. Erza thought back to the waiter back in the inn, saying that people were saying that the monolith was some sort of ancient ruins. Erza was sure that the monolith's condition was not in ruins, but it was certainly that it was ancient. The letters on the wall seemed to be so kind of language of a long time ago. Slowly, Erza saw the light at the end of the hallway, and it took her another few seconds before she arrived at the opening. Once again, Erza was shocked to see that the hallway led to a gigantic open room that was the size of a few large stadiums. There were the same cryptic letters of the wall of the large room, and all the letters were glowing a bright blue. 10 massive crystal pillars supported the room, and each of them were pulsing in power. At the center of the large room was a glowing white box about the size of a house, and Erza had a feeling that there was something very important inside it. The woman jumped down and used her wings to hover over to the glowing box. "Weird and sudden, this all made but damn thing are so cool here," muttered Erza with a smirk on her face as she landed outside of the box. Erza walked around the box one full time and saw that there was no entrance to it and she stood outside of it with narrowed eyes. Slowly, Erza reached to touch one side of the box with her hand and much to her surprise, her hand slipped right through. The whole box was intransparent, but it was just a membrane that only blocked people visually. With an exhale, Erza walked through the glowing white wall and stepped into the box. Erza was expecting some sort of artifact to be on the other side, but she certainly did not expect a baby floating in the middle of the box. Apparently the cries earlier was actually a baby and it was still crying out loudly. Erza didn't know how to react or respond to such paranormal things. There was not supposed to be a live baby inside the gigantic monolith that was supposed to be thousands of years old. The woman walked over to the baby and looked down. She saw that he was a little boy and looked to be only a few days old. The little baby was crying quite loudly with his little hands gripped into fists. Small traces of blonde hair was on his head and there was some sort of weird marking that was like the letters all around the monolith tattooed onto his belly. Erza couldn't help but smile at the baby, he was really cute. Erza hesitated a little before she placed her blade down on the ground and wrapped her arms around the small babe. She pulled him to her chest and away from the middle of the box. Erza smiled down at the boy and slowly rocked him from side to side. The boy seemed to calm down a little and stopped crying, then for the first time ever, the boy opened his eyes to look at the person who was holding him. Erza smiled brighter at the sight of the boy's big and round azure blue eyes. They were beautiful. "You are a cute little one, aren't you?" cooed the usually cool and collected Erza. The baby began to giggle and waved his little hands in the air for the red-haired lady. "Ba-ba-ba-ba," gurgled the babe as he clapped his hands together. Erza snickered as wiggled her nose against the baby's tummy. "Bu-bu-bu-bu." The boy started to laugh and it was a great melody to Erza's ears. Erza started to laugh along with the boy. She had no idea what the hell was going on, but the boy made her feel really happy. Erza lightly placed a finger on the baby's little nose and wiggled it around. "Who are you, little guy?" slurred out the beautiful lady with pursed lips. "You are not some 5,000 years old baby, are you?" The baby just continued to clap his hands together and giggled at Erza. "Ba-ba-ba-ba." Suddenly, the room began to change again. Erza held onto the base securely as the box around them vanished from sight and the letters on the main walls of the room began to glow brighter. The 10 pillars around Erza and the baby started to rumble and disperse even more power than before. Erza gritted her teeth as she held her blade in one hand and the baby in her free arm. She knew that she had to get out of where she was, but she was afraid that the place would start to collapse from within. The light became brighter and brighter and Erza was forced to close her eyes. She placed a hand of the baby's eyes to protect his little eyes from being damaged, but the baby started to squirm around. The ground around Erza began to rumble and shake, and some sort of energy was building up in the middle of the large room. Erza stabbed her blade in the ground and hugged the baby close to her chest. For some reason she knew she had to protect the baby at all costs. The light grew stronger and stronger, and a high-pitched drone was echoing through the room. Soon Erza couldn't even move, the light made her eyes hurt a little, and the noise was almost unbearable. Erza hugged the baby tighter and hoped that the strangest things would stop soon, but everything just kept on getting stronger and stronger. Then suddenly everything stopped. The ground stopped shaking, the light was gone, and it was dead quiet again. Erza slowly opened her eyes. While she expected to see the glowing walls again, it was not what she saw. To the ever shock and frustration of Erza, she was back outside in the countryside, standing once again at the edge of the gigantic hole. But this time, the monolith was gone, and the large hole was left barren. Erza couldn't react for a few seconds, there was no way to explain everything that had happened so far. Erza looked around and saw that all the mages that were present were all gone. There was not a soul in sight. What the hell is going on? Some light squirming in her arms broke Erza out of her stupor, and she looked down to see a pair of azure blue eyes look back up at her. Erza was instantly reminded of the baby and quickly tended to him. She checked if he was hurt from the strong lighter sound, but she found that he was perfectly fine. He wasn't even crying after all of that. Erza chuckled a little and rocked the baby lightly. "You are a strong little guy, aren't you?" said the woman as she smiled at the baby. "I guess I'll bring you back to Fairy Tale with Mehmet. The master would know what was that back there." With that, Erza flew back towards town to turn in for the night, but she was still trying to wrap her mind around all that had happened so far. Morning broke out for the day, and sunlight pierced the windows of Erza's room at the inn. The red-haired lady was sleeping in her regular pajamas, and her hair was spread out all over her pillow. She lifted her hand to block the sunlight that was in her eyes and rolled over to face the side of the room. When she got back to the inn last night, Erza was dead tired and fell asleep almost instantly and slept right till morning. The first thing Erza thought about was that everything that had happened was just a crazy dream, but she saw something that told her it wasn't. The baby she found just a few hours ago was sleeping soundly next to her on the bed. So everything was real, huh? Muttered the young woman softly as she reached a hand over to brush the baby's cheek lightly. Erza got out of bed and picked the baby up into her arms. "You sure are a brave baby, you can still sleep so deeply after all that stuff last night." Then Erza found something to be different. Baby was much heavier than she remembered. Holding the little boy at arm's reach, Erza saw that the boy had grown slightly through the night. No, he looked to be about a few months old. Erza's jaw was slightly dropped as she looked at the boy. "What the hell, how did you grow so much in one night?" The boy's eyes began to twitch as he woke up, and his azure blue eyes once again looked into the shocked brown orbs of Erza's own. The boy began to clap his hands together and giggled again the moment he saw Erza. "Ba-ba-ba-ba." Erza sighed and sat down on the bed. "Oh, I give you. You'll just ask master what is all this later." The end. Prophecy Rebirth Chapter 2. Fairy Tale is the strongest guild in the kingdom of Fiori, and the name of Fairy Tale represents a sense of adventure for one to be able to discover more about mysteries and fate. With such a philosophy, one can expect the mages within the guild to be adventurous and courageous, but that was not all. Well, most other mages in other guilds would prefer prestige and power, but the Fairy Tale mages were different. To the people of Fiori, Fairy Tale mages were known to wreak havoc and cause chaos wherever they go, and the mages were very proud of it. They wouldn't be Fairy Tale if they were considerate of their surroundings. One would say that it was Fairy Tale's culture, they were all just happy and weird people, but they were undoubtedly powerful. On this fateful day, the guild of Fairy Tale was having their usual brawl right in the middle of their base. "Damn you, Gray," cried a lean, muscular young man of average height with a slightly tanned skin tone, black eyes, and spiky pink-colored hair. His outfit consisted of a sleeveless gold-trimmed black waistcoat, often left open and unbuckled, exposing his bare chest, white knee-length trousers, a thick black wristband on his left wrist, black open-toed sandals and a scale-patterned scarf. The young man named Gray jumped to the side to dodge a ball of fire blasted at him by the other young man. "Is that all you got, slanted eyes?" taunted the man as he jumped around from table to table. "You'll never beat me," Natsu admitted. Natsu growled and gripped his fists tighter. "You wish, bastard," cried the young mage as he slammed his literally enflamed fists together as he jumped at Gray again. Gray placed his right fist on his left palm as a blue icy mist shrouded around him. "Ice make. Hammer," exclaimed the man as a large hammer made out of ice manifested in the air and dropped on Natsu. Gray was a toned and muscular young man, and his features were more dominantly exposed due to his lack of clothes. He has dark blue eyes and black hair with a scar on his forehead. "Varric no Tekken," cried Natsu as he pummeled the hammer with his fists, and it shattered to pieces. "Oh, Natsu," cried a blue cat that was hovering in midair with his wings. On the side, many other mages from Fairy Tail were watching the two boys with amusement. It was clear to them that the rivals would always act like so. A beautiful, slim young woman was smiling at the sight. She had long, white hair which curled slightly at the ends, with two bangs framing her face and reaching down to her chest. Her hairstyle's most distinctive trait is a short, upward ponytail obtained by gathering and tying the hair covering her forehead. She was wearing a long, elegant red dress that expressed her great figure. "They never change. Natsu and Gray always fight like this, you don't have to worry, Lucy," said the white-haired girl with a smile on her face. Lucy has brown eyes and shoulder-length blonde hair that is usually tied by ribbons in a variety of colors in a small ponytail to the right side of her head, with the rest of the hair loose. She was a young mage that ran into Natsu just a few days ago and had decided to join Fairy Tail. She was still trying to get used to her friend fighting with his other friend very seriously. It was a wonder that everything in the bar was still intact. Lucy chuckled a little sheepishly and nodded. "Okay, Murahin-san," muttered the girl as she sat down on a bar stool. Suddenly a man ran into the main room with a paled face and an extremely afraid expression. "Hey everybody," cried the man as he looked frantic. "Erza is back." As soon as those words left his mouth, everyone in the guild began to stagger in shock. Natsu and Gray instantly stopped their fight and sweated like crazy, and everyone who were conversing all stopped. Luch sat quietly in her seat as he looked back at Murahin. "Who is this Erza, Murahin-san?" asked the young blonde girl curiously. "I heard Natsu and Happy talk about her before and they both said that she is really scary." Murahin giggled and shook her head in amusement. "Erza-san is one of the strongest mages in Fairy Tail. She grew up with Natsu and Gray guests that are just scared of her, that's all," chirped the happy lady at the newest member of the guild. Lucy nodded in response, but the heavy incoming footsteps getting louder and louder were making her believe in Natsu way more than Murahin. Soon a long shadow stretched itself from the main door of the guild and everyone remained silent as they all waited for Erza to come through the door. Natsu and Gray had their arms around each other's shoulder as if they were very friendly with each other and they both forced a smile on their faces. Lucy could only wonder just what kind of person this Erza was if she had such an effect on someone as hyper as Natsu. Soon a person carrying on large monster horn walked through the door and she cautiously placed it on the ground, making the whole building shake. Erza's face was revealed to her friends and it made most of them feel even more intimidated than before. Erza's eyes darted around the area and scanned all those who were staring at her as if she was trying to see if anyone was doing anything wrong and promised that punishment would be delivered. Lucy was staring at Erza in awe. "She's beautiful," thought the girl as she looked at her senpai. Erza smiled over at Natsu and Gray. "It's good to see you too, Natsu," Gray muttered, the red-haired young woman. "You both are sure in good terms." Gray chuckled and rubbed the back of his head. "Of course we are best friends," exclaimed the young man a bit frantically. Natsu just nodded with a huge forced smile. "Aye." Erza smiled and nodded before she looked over at Murahin, who was smiling at her. "Hey Mira, is Master here?" asked Erza politely to her longtime friend. Murahin shook her head with a perpetual smile. "No, Master just went to a guildmaster meeting yesterday." Erza grunted annoyed, she really wanted to ask the master about what happened to her a day ago. Okay, it was also then that Murahin noticed that Erza was holding a small bundle in her arms and it seemed to be moving. "Oh no, Erza," started Murahin as Erza looked over at her. "What is that you are holding?" With that question, everyone looked over at Erza and indeed saw a small bundle in her arms. Natsu walked over to Erza to take a closer look at the moving thing in her arms. Erza was about to answer, but it was also then that the baby decided to wake up fully and sat up a little on Erza's arm and his little head popped out of the bundlethy red-haired girl's side as she didn't even know how her guildmates would react, but she smiled when the baby boy started to giggle up at her and pat her on the cheek. For the few hours Erza had been traveling with the small boy, she really found him to be adorable and fun. It was unusual for someone like her, but it was true. Everyone around were in silence and Natsu slowly pointed a finger at the baby. "Erza, did you become a mom?" Erza suddenly popped a vein on her forehead and whacked Natsu right on his head. "He's not my kid, you idiot." The S-class mage glared down at the fallen pink-haired young man menacingly. "I found him on my mission and I had to ask the master about him." The baby started to whimper a little and was on the verge of crying from Erza's loud voice, but she saw it and quickly started to rock him gently. "Sorry, it's okay, I'm only mad at the idiot on the ground." Gray chuckled at Natsu on the ground. "Well, that is a strange thing to run into on a job, are you sure his parents weren't around?" Erza nodded seriously. "I am definitely sure," muttered the young woman as she sat down with the boy still in her arms. "Let me tell you guys the whole story." Erza spent the next half an hour explaining the whole experience of the monolith and the strange weather phenomenon, and it was safe to say that the whole guild was in dead silence afterwards. Nobody present had ever heard of anything remotely similar to what Erza had experienced. They all could understand why Erza would want to ask the master about the boy. All the while Natsu and Gray were both staring at the boy intently and the baby was just looking straight back at them innocently. Natsu lightly poked the baby's cheek, making the boy giggle a little. So he's some sort of baby that was trapped in some ancient ruins and when you found him he was still alive and he grew a few months overnight. Erza nodded. Pretty Moochie have no idea what to do with him, so I brought him back to show him to master. Said the young woman as she involuntarily rocked the baby slowly. Murahin smiled and ruffled the little bits of blonde hair of the baby's head. Well maybe he can join Fairy Tail, said the kind lady as everyone looked at her surprised. He is an orphan so to speak and he is just so cute. Chirped Murahin as she tickled the baby's chin. Lucy giggled at the squirming and laughing baby and nodded. Yeah, he is a very happy baby. Erza suddenly looked around and smiled when she saw her friend Levi. Levi was a young teenage girl with a slender build and stood at a height below average for her age. She sports blue hair, with the top cut short and the bottom longer, normally tied up with a colorful bandana around her head. She was in an orange sundress and smiled back at Erza when she made eye contact. Hey Levi, come here for a second. Said Erza as she laid the baby on the table. Levi nodded and walked up to the crowded table to sit down next to Erza. What is it Erza-chan? Erza opened the cloth she wrapped around the baby's body to show Levi several marks that were tattooed on the baby's torso and arms. Some letters forms 3 circles on the baby's belly and some more letters made 2 circles around both of his arms. Erza looked up at a surprised Levi. Do you have any idea what these letters are saying? Levi had widened eyes as she ran her fingers through the letters on the baby, making the small boy giggle and squirm. I've never seen such letters before and anything that is similar to them were from an ancient text that dates back almost 5 millennia ago. Explained the girl as others listening were in shock. I might be able to translate parts of it though said Levi as he placed on a pair of glasses. Erza smiled. Thanks Levi. Everyone let Levi work in silence for the next few minutes and the only one making noises was the baby who was squirming around cutely as Levi's finger tickled his skin. Levi couldn't help but smile at the adorable boy as she worked, he was really cute. In moments' time, Levi had several books on ancient text in front of her on the table and she had already tried to match the wording with almost 10 different old texts already but she couldn't find any matches. She knew that she couldn't translate anything that was on the baby's arms and torso but there was one thing that she could read. Levi wiped some sweat off her forehead as she looked up at Erza. I'm sorry Erza-chan. I can't translate anything that really matters on his body but I can read one thing that is on his right arm. Erza nodded in understanding. It's alright, what can you find on his arm though? Levi smiled and poked the baby's cheek a little. I think it is his name looks like whoever tattoos these markings on his also named him. The red-haired mage smiled. Really? Asked Erza excitedly. What is it? The magical reader smiled. His name should be something akin to Uzumaki Naruto. Erza smiled as she lifted the baby boy into her arms again. Naruto-chan, huh? Muttered the young woman as she held the boy close to her and little Naruto wrapped his small arms around Erza's neck and drifted off to sleep. Natsu started to chuckle. Who the hell would name their son after ramen topping? Cried the young man as he and his cat laughed. Erza suddenly had an evil look on her face as she appeared behind Natsu. You got a problem with Naruto? Natsu grew pale at Erza's voice and quickly shook his head. And no, he whimpered quietly. Naruto is a terrific name. Erza gave Natsu a stern look. Good she muttered before she once again started to rock Naruto gently as he slept comfortably in her arms. She had a soft smile on her face as she listened to the soft breathing of the boy in her arms. She felt a very intimate connection with him already. Murahin looked over her friend's shoulder at the baby. I think Naruto-chan thinks of you as his parent Erza-san. Erza chuckled a little sheepishly as she patted Naruto's back. Well I am way too young to be a mother, so I'll be his big sister at most. Said the red-haired mage with a happy smile before she looked over at Murahin. Do you want to hold him Mira? The beautiful model for Fairy Tail nodded with a smile. Yes please. Murahin reached her arms out and lifted the sleeping baby off of Erza's shoulders. Oh is so precious. Murahin rocked the baby gently like Erza and patted his back as he slept. Gray smiled and ruffled the boy's head. He is cute. The tall, slim, young woman with an ample bust stood beside Gray and nodded at his words. She had long brown hair that reached down to the middle of her back. Her name was Kana Alberona. Kana was known as one of the best mages in the guild and was definitely the best drinker in Fairy Tail. I don't think I've ever seen such blue eyes before. Said Kana as she wiggled the baby's nose. The younger brother of Murahin. Elfman walked up to his sister and smiled down at the baby. Elfman was a very tall and muscular man, he had spiky hair that was the same color as his sister's, but he had much more angular face. Hey Ni-chan, let me hold him for a second, asked the tall man enthusiastically. Murahin smiled and nodded at her brother before she handed the baby over to him. The tall man accepted the baby with open arms and lifted him up to his height. "Oh, I can tell that he is going to grow up to be a real man," announced Elfman as he held the boy high. The loud noises and movements woke Naruto up and he looked down to see Elfman holding him. Slowly, the boy had tears welling in his eyes and he suddenly cried out and wailed his arms and legs around. Elfman was shocked and had no idea what to do. Natsu laughed and pointed a finger at Elfman. "You scared Naruto with you face, Elfman," cried the young man as he rolled around on the floor laughing. Gray and the others were also laughing at the big man's expense and Murahin just kept smiling. Naruto wiggled around in Elfman's hands until he saw Erza just below him. "Baba," babbled Naruto as he reached his arms out to Erza, making many people smile at the sight. Elfman handed Naruto back to Erza with a sheepish smile. "You should hold him, Erza." "Okay," said Erza as she took Naruto back with a smile. Naruto instantly stopped crying when Erza held him in her arms again and he once again wrapped his arms around her neck. Everyone could see the big smile on Naruto's face as he looked up at Erza. They could tell that the boy was already quite attached to his surrogate sister. Erza smiled back at the babe and patted his head with one hand. Happy flew closer to Naruto and smiled. "How old do you think he is right now?" asked the cat curiously. "If he grows a few months every night, then he will be full grown very quickly." Erza tilted her head to the side. "I don't think he grows every night, ever since early this morning he had been normal. I think something will cause him to grow quickly at times," said the S-class mage as she looked down at the baby in her arms. "But either way, we have to get him some proper clothes and some baby supplies." Murahin nodded happily. "That's right. We should go buy some now." Erza nodded at her friend. "Okay, then we will both go." Hana walked up as well. "Hey, I'll tag along. I have to buy some wine at the market anyway." Murahin nodded. "Okay, let's go." Magnolia Town has many different marketplaces and there one in particular where it sold children's supplies. Erza, Murahin and Kana were all headed towards that direction together and Naruto was sitting quietly in Erza's arms as he looked around. There was a huge smile on the little boy's face as his eyes darted all over the place as he took in all the festive sights around town. Erza smiled at the happy boy. He was saying when they were traveling, he would have endless curiosity and would find a reason to smile in everything. Murahin also felt delighted by the boy. "Naruto-chan sure is a happy child," said the young woman as she patted the boy's head again. Ana also had a smirk on her face as she nodded along. "Yeah." Erza absent-mindedly rubbed the back of Naruto lighting as she looked up at the clouds in thought. "So what do we need to buy for Naruto?" muttered the young mage to herself. "We need some clothes, diapers, milk bottles, milk formula." Murahin crossed her arms together. There were also baby toothbrushes, baby powder for the diapers, some light shampoo for when he has more hair, and maybe some semi-solid food. Listed the white-haired girl as she counted off each item with her fingers. Ana stretched her arms up before she looked over at her two friends. "We would also need a baby carriage so we wouldn't have to carry him in our arms constantly, and we need a crib and maybe some toys for him to play with." Erza rubbed her temples with her free hand. "Geez, there sure are a lot of things to buy when we really think about it," mumbled the young woman as she looked at the smiling baby. "But I guess I have a lot of room at my place, so we should be fine," finished Erza with a smile. Ana rose an eyebrow at her words. "So Naruto is going to live with you, Erza?" The red-haired woman nodded. "Yep, I think currently I am the only one he is really comfortable with, so he should live with me." Murahin smiled. "Well, we all live in the same building anyway, so we can all help you take care of Naruto-chan," chirped the happy woman as she looked at her longtime friend. "Right, Naruto-chan, you have a lot of older sisters back in the dormitory." Ana smiled. "The older sisters are fine, but when you think about it, all the older brother figure he will have are all kind of weird," said the drinker with a deadpan look. "One of them likes to burn things, one doesn't like to wear clothes, one talks about men all the time, and one hits on every girl he sees." Kana shook her head with each example she listed. "Oh my god, I don't even want to see how Naruto turns out if they are his only role models." Erza actually had a smile on her face. "Well, if that really happens then we will know that he will be a perfect candidate for a fairy tale mage." Ana smiled and Murahin nodded enthusiastically. "That's right." For the next few hours Erza, Murahin, Kana and Naruto had walked through most parts of the market they were in and they had finally bought most of what they needed. Erza was used to carrying around extremely heavy loads, so she had no problems holding on to the many bags that they had. They had bought a nice crib for Naruto and everything else that they may need to take care of a baby. Kana had also bought enough wine for the night. Naruto had been having the time of his life sitting around in Erza's arms. He had been awake for the whole few hours they were shopping and had a lot of fun just looking around his surroundings. The boy had been almost constantly giggling the whole time and he would always twist and turn around Erza in order to get a better view of things. Murahin found the baby to be cuter by the minute and she had bought him a small ice cream cone to lick on. Hana wiped some sweat of her forehead as she staggered out of the market. Finalu got everything right. Erza smirked and nodded. Yeah, we have everything we need. Announced the pretty lady as she hugged Naruto closer to herself. Murahan looked over at Erza and the baby boy. Excuse me, Erza-chan, will holding Naruto-chan so close to your armor hurt him? Erza silently though about Murahan's words for a second before she suddenly paled. Ah! Cried the S-class mage as she quickly held the knife further away from her chest. Are you okay, Naruto? Frantically asked Erza as she looked at the boy to see if he had any injuries. How can I be so careless? Cried Erza as she re-equipped back to her normal buttoned-up shirt and blue scarf. Naruto just continued to laugh and smile at Erza. Bababa babbled the boy as he placed his hand on Erza's cheek. Murahan smiled. Oh, he's fine, don't worry, Erza-chan. Hana chuckled and placed one hand on her hip. You know, I think Naruto is the only male who could touch Erza's cheek too casually and not be beaten half dead. Joked the brown-haired girl amused. Erza smirked. You got that right. The 3 women and 1 baby headed back towards Fairy Tail with all their bags in tow, and the sun was just about to set. The night vendors were all setting up for their main business hours, and there were many bright lights in the streets. Naruto had a huge smile on his face as he patted Erza to get her attention, and the young woman only nodded at his actions. Murahan giggled again at the small boy as she moved her face in front of Naruto. Hello, Naruto-chan, look at this. Chirped Murahan as she transformed her face into that of Happy's. Happy as cute eye. Naruto laughed and waved his hands around. Bababa. Murahan just laughed melodically as she reverted back to normal. Erza-chan, can I hold him again? Asked Mira as she clapped her hands together. Erza chuckled. Of course, Mira. Said the woman as she handed Naruto over to his other older sister. Murahan hugged Naruto close to her ample bosom. You are just the cutest little baby. Cried the lady as she pulled Naruto back a little so he wouldn't suffocate. And you will be the most handsome man in Fairy Tail when you grow up. Hana smirked and nodded. Yep, he will surely have all the ladies fighting for him. As the small group was all on the way back to their guild, a random group's conversation caught Erza's attention. Erza stealthily gestured Kana and Murahan to the talking group who was just walking casually ahead of them, and from the looks of it, they were drunk out of their minds. There was one word in their conversation that stood out in Erza's senses: Eisenwald. I am sure Ravidi will be able to break the seal of lullaby. Muttered a man as he staggered around against his friends. Another man chuckled and nodded. Whatever, man, but if you do, Eisenwald will be unstoppable. Hana was about to confront the group with her card magic, but she was held back by Murahan. Not now, Kana-chan, come back to the guild so we have time to think this over. Said the lady as she gently rocked a sleepy Naruto in her arms. Erza nodded. I agree, let's go. Naruto looked over at Erza from Murahan's shoulder and reached over for her. Baba Murahan smiled and handed Naruto back to his closest person. Erza smiled when Naruto fully relaxed into her hold and rested his head on her shoulder. Erza patted Naruto's head and wrapped her arms around her. Sleep for now, Naruto. Naruto snuggled deeper into the crook of Erza's neck with his eyes closed. Here-chan, muttered the boy before he fell asleep. Prophecy Rebirth Chapter 3. It was morning in the beautiful town of Magnolia, and the sun was beginning its daily cycle around town. The warm glow of the sun peeked into the many windows of the female dormitories of Fairy Tail and landed on the fluttering eyes of Erza Scarlet. The S-class mage had an exhausting night and had gotten to bed right after she set up the crib for Naruto. Shopping for the powerful mage was enjoyable most of the time, but she found it to be more exhausting than an S-class job. But nonetheless, it had to be done. Erza just hoped that Naruto would enjoy the many things they had bought him last night. Erza gently smiled at the thought of the baby boy. He really brought a lot of joy to the guild within the very short moment he had arrived. Naruto was the first baby to arrive at Fairy Tail so young, and having a baby in the house bring a lot of joy and happiness. Murahan and Kana certainly loved Naruto's company, especially the former because of her dominant feminine side. Even after the finished shopping for everything, Mirahana spent another 2 hours just playing with Naruto when they got back to the dormitories. Then there was the highlight of last night, Naruto's first word. Erza had really thought that she imagined it, seeing that normal kids under the age of 1 wouldn't be able to say anything properly yet, but Naruto say it clearly for a second time right after. Erza had a smile on her face as she thought back to the little boy calling her Er-chan. It was weird for Erza to be so hyped up by such small things, but she was really happy that Naruto said her name first. The S-class mage pushed herself from her bed and headed her way to Naruto's crib. Are you awake, Naruto-chan? The moment Erza looked down into the crib she was in shock. Naruto had grown up a lot again. This time it was not just a few months. Now the boy looked like he was almost 2 years old. Naruto's head was now filled with golden spiky locks. He even had 2 bangs frame the sides of his face. Naturally, the boy had stretched out in height and his body covered almost all of the crib space. Erza's jaw dropped a little at the sight. What the hell? Muttered the young woman to herself as she slowly reached down for the boy. Why do you randomly have overnight growth spurts? The little pajamas Erza had bought last night were ripped apart, it seemed that Naruto's growth had busted open the seams in the clothes. The boy's eyes were twitching as one of his hands reached up to rub his right eye. Then the boy's eyes opened and the first thing he saw was Erza looking down at him with a very surprised face. Naruto smiled when he saw Erza and clapped his hands together. "Ear-chan," cried Naruto with a slightly more steady voice than last night. Erza sighed and gave Naruto a sweet smile. "Good morning, Naruto-chan," said the girl as she picked up the boy. Naruto nuzzled against Erza and wrapped his arms around her neck. "Er-chan." The S-class mage had no idea why Naruto would just suddenly grow at random intervals, she was worried that he would shorten his life with those random growth spurts. Erza really hoped that the growing would return to normal soon or Naruto would become an old man in a couple of months. The red-haired girl hugged the boy gently and closed her eyes. She didn't want Naruto to grow up so quickly. Erza just smiled. "Well, I can just hope for the best," announced the girl to herself before she patted Naruto's back. "Let's get you some breakfast, Naruto-chan." "What happened to Naru-chan?" cried a catatonic Murahin as she held the 2-year-old boy her arms. Erza had brought Naruto the guild again to show the other member what happened to the boy and it was safe to say that everyone was shocked to the core. They were a little dubious when Erza told them that Naruto grew a few months overnight, but now they believed her fully as the boy just jumped a year and a half forward overnight. Murahin and Kana were the ones who were the most shocked by the sudden change because they were just playing with a young toddler last night. Erza sighed as she crossed her arm together. "See what I mean, Naruto-chan just randomly grows overnight." Murahin kissed Naruto on the cheek. "Oh, are you alright, Naru-chan?" asked the white-haired girl as she held the boy close. His body must have been stretched out pretty intensely if he grew so much in such a short time. Naruto giggled at his kind older sister and wrapped his arms around her neck. Anna also had a worried look on her face as she sat down next to Murahin and Naruto. "He seems to be alright but we really have to ask Master about this as soon as he gets back." Murahin nodded at her friend's words. "Master should be back by tonight or tomorrow morning at the lastest," said the girl as she rocked Naruto up and down. Hopefully he would be able to explain what is happening to Naru-chan. Erza just nodded at Murahin's words silently. Natsu and Happy sat across from Murahin and were both staring at the baby. "The little guy sure is curious, has been looking all over the place for 10 minutes already," said Natsu as he rested his chin on his palm. Naruto was cluelessly looking around the guild while he sat quietly in Murahin's arms. "Baba," babbled the boy as he saw Happy hover near him. Naruto reached up with one hand and grabbed Happy by the tail, making the cat cry out in shock and pain. The boy laughed as he pulled the cat down and he hugged Happy when he was in range. Naruto was happy that he caught the cat and looked up at Erza with a huge smile. "Er-chan," cried the boy loudly. Lucy, who was sitting beside Natsu, giggled at the sight, while Natsu was a little amused that Happy was being used as a baby's toy. "Naruto-chan wouldn't hurt you, Happy, just play with him a little," said Lucy as she enjoyed the sight of the boy playing with the cat. The blonde girl reached a hand over to ruffle the boy's spiky hair. "You know, his spiky hair kind of reminds me of you, Natsu." Natsu smirked as he looked over at Lucy while Murahin hugged the boy closer smiling. "As I said last night, when Naru-chan grows up fully, I'm sure he will be the most handsome man in fairy tale," chippered Murahin as she smoothed Naruto again. Wakao, an older man who had been in fairy tale for a long time, crossed his arms and huffed. "I don't think I will agree with you on that," muttered the man to himself quietly. Erza patted Naruto's head and the boy released Happy from his arms to reach for his favorite person. "Er-chan," cried the boy happily as Erza picked him up again. Happy flew back to Natsu out of breath. "And Naruto really has a strong grip," muttered the cat as he landed on top of Natsu's head. Murahin stood up and smiled at Naruto. "Hey Naru-chan, can you say my name?" asked the girl as Naruto looked over at her. "I am Mira-chan, can you say Mira?" Naruto stared at his older sister's lip as she talked and he started to move his lips the same way. Mira mumbled Naruto softly as he patted his own face. Murahin laughed melodically and nodded. "Yes," exclaimed the girl happily. "You are so smart, Naru-chan." Erza smiled and handed Naruto over to Murahin. "Mira, I'm going to ask you to take care of Naruto-chan for the day, still have to follow up on what we heard on the streets last night," said Erza as she got back to serious business. "I need to find out more about these people's relations with Eisenwald and what lullaby is." Natsu, Gray and Lucy all perked up at the name of lullaby. "Hey Erza, we ran into some people who were talking about some lullaby too," said Natsu as he stood up. "We got into a fight with them just a few days ago." Gray nodded. "Yes, they were saying something about lullaby, but they fled before we could ask anything else." Erza nodded back. "We also heard something about them last night and we think they are affiliated with Eisenwald," said Erza, making many people shocked at the news. Eisenwald was a dark guild and was famous for its thirst for gold. They were talking about unsealing something called a lullaby, and if they are Eisenwald, that can only be a bad thing. Naruto was still in Murahin's arms, looking around without a clue of what was going on. Levi and Lucy's eyes suddenly widened. "Hey, think I've read about something called the lullaby before," said Levi as she looked over at her guildmates. "It is some sort of killing magic." Lucy nodded along. "And it is not just any killing magic. It was said that whoever listened to the music of the lullaby would die right away," whispered the blonde girl a little reluctantly. "But it was just a story from an old book, we don't know if it is actually true." Erza shook her head. "It doesn't matter, all we know is that Eisenwald is up to something and we have to stop them before they succeed," announced Erza as she looked over at Natsu and Gray. "You two will come with me, I will need the help if we are going to go up against an entire guild." Many people were shocked that Erza actually asked for help on a job that was almost unheard of. Murahin held Naruto in her arms as she looked shocked at the group. "Wow, Erza, Natsu and Gray, this may be the strongest team in Fairy Tail." Natsu grinned at the prospect of fighting an entire guild. "Yosh!" cried the young man as he slammed his fists together. "Let's do this." Gray sighed and stood up. "It's not like I need Natsu to come along," muttered man as Natsu glared over at him. "But since this is so important, I'll deal with it." Erza smirked with her arms crossed. "Good, we will leave in 1 hour." Magnolia Station was one of the busiest places in Magnolia. It was one of the main trade route of the town, and many magic merchants would set up stands of their own there. Trains connect the many town in the Fiori, and Erza planned to travel directly to Eisenwald to confront them of their hidden motives. By the hour Natsu and Gray were already packed and ready to go. The last thing they wanted was for Erza to reprimand them of being tardy. Natsu leaned against a pillar of the station with his arms crossed. "Where is Erza? She told us to be here in 1 hour, and she is late," muttered the young man as Happy nibbled on a fish next to him. Gray grunted in agreement. "Don't let her hear you say that, she'll just be angry and beat you up," said the ice mage as he looked behind him and saw Lucy nervously sitting on a bench. "Why are you here anyway, Lucy? I thought Erza only asked us to come." The blonde beauty was holding on to her pet celestial being, Payan, as she looked up at Gray with a frown. "Murahin-san told me to come. Said that I have to look out for you and Natsu and stop you two from destroying too many buildings," said Lucy with a groan. "It's not like I wanted to come." Gray just shrugged before he looked back in front, and it was then that he saw Erza coming towards them with a mountain of things behind her. Natsu and Lucy also looked on the scene a little shocked. It was a wonder that Erza was able to pull on her luggage like it weighed like a feather. Natsu placed his arms on his hips. "What the hell, Erza? Why are you bringing so many things?" Erza just gave Natsu a bland look. "We are going up against one of the most infamous dark guilds in Fiori. I need to bring more sets of armor just in case," explained the red-haired beauty as she stopped in front of the group. "I can't fit everything in my magic space, you know." Lucy stood up and faced her group. "Let's just get on the train now, it's about to leave," said the girl as she quickly walked in first, so she would have to wait for Erza to push her things in. The Fairy Tail group took a cart at the end of the train, so Erza could put her stuff there without other passengers complaining about the lack of space. It was fortunate for them that it was rather low season, so the train was not very crowded. Erza sat down with a sigh as she finished putting her things in place. "It will take us almost the whole day to get to our stop, so take this time to rest up," muttered the S-class mage as she closed her eyes to lean back against her seat as the others joined her in doing the same thing. Inside her mind Erza couldn't help but think of Naruto. She was a little worried that he would be looking for her while she was gone. If Naruto was to have a growth spurt again during the night, then she wouldn't be able to see him until the day after. "Er-chan." Erza shook her head as she sighed. "I'm so worried I am starting to hear Naruto-chan's voice," thought the young woman as she tried to best to sleep. Erza," said Happy as he patted Erza on the shoulder. Erza opened her eyes to look at the hovering cat. "What is it, Happy?" asked the young mage a little annoyed. Happy just silently pointed over to the top of Erza's mountain of luggage, and Erza along with the others in the booth all looked up to see a smiling Naruto looking around the place excitedly. Natsu, Gray and Lucy all had wide eyes as they looked back at Erza. Erza stared at Naruto for a few seconds before she realized what was really happening. "Naruto-chan," cried Erza as she stood up and quickly pulled Naruto into her arms. "What are you doing here?" demanded the S-class mage as she placed the young boy on her lap. Naruto just laughed and waved his hands around. "Er-chan." Gray chuckled and patted the boy's head. "He must have crawled into your huge pile of stuff. Well, you or Pekingi got to say that the little guy really has a sense of adventure," said the young man as Natsu nodded in agreement. Lucy patted the small boy's head. "He must have wanted to follow you here, but I thought Murahin-san was looking after him." Back in Fairy Tail, Murahin was finished cooking some soft oatmeal for Naruto and she was heading back to the main lobby of Fairy Hills, the female dorms of Fairy Tail, to feed the boy his lunch. The white-haired young woman had a smile on her face as she thought about all the fun games she could teach Naruto. She already laid out several board games she was going to play with Naruto later. "Naru-chan, time for lunch," chirped Murahin as she walked back to the lobby area, but she saw that the high chair she placed him in was empty. Where did Naru-chan go?" asked a woman to herself as she looked around the room. Murahin was starting to get scared. She had no idea where the boy ran off to. "Naru-chan," cried the beautiful woman. "Come back to Mirani." Erza sighed as she cursed Murahin inwardly. "We have no choice. We have to bring Naruto-chan with us," said the red-haired woman as she held the boy on her lap. "I don't want to and it is definitely dangerous, but we have to bring him back to the guild because we have to get to the next town as soon as possible." Gray sighed and rested his head against the side of the window. It will be difficult to fight and protect the kid at the same time. Someone is going to watch over Naruto while we are confronting Eisenwald. Lucy looked over at Erza and smiled. "I'll take care of Naruto-chan if we really have to fight later. I am not that much of a fighter anyway." The S-class mage nodded. "That is good. If we are to have a battle later on, Lucy will watch over Naruto-chan," said Erza before she looked over at Happy. "Happy should also stay with them so he could quickly tell us if they are attacked." The flying cat nodded and said, "Aye, Erza." Lucy smiled and leaned in closer to Naruto. "You really miss Erza-san, don't you? So much that you climb up all those boxes of luggage to follow her," chirped the blonde girl as she ruffled the boy's spiky hair. Natsu chuckled and patted Naruto's head also. "This is a brave little guy. I'm sure he will be a strong kid when he grows up." Suddenly everyone looked over at Natsu and saw that his face started to pale as he covered his mouth with his hands. The train had started to move, but the young dragon slayer was no match for any form of transportation. Lucy and Gray sighed as Naruto pointed a finger at Natsu and giggled heartedly. "Yes," muttered Erza with a smile as she wrapped her arms around Naruto. "But back to business, this is what we have to do when we arrive in Aniba's town," said the leader of the group as she leaned back fully to her seat. "According to the information we have back in Fairy Tail, Eisenwald members were seen in the next town recently, so we have reason to believe that some of them would still be there and there might also be where they would launch their plan." Gray raised an eyebrow at the instructions. "But you saw some of them last night back in Magnolia, wouldn't there be a chance that they would be back there?" asked the ice mage as he crossed his arms together. Erza nodded at her friend's words. "That may be possible, but it is less likely since they wouldn't risk catching the eyes of Fairy Tail before they plan is completely according to what we heard last night, they still need some time to fully use the lullaby," explained the red-haired beauty as she absent-mindedly fiddled with Naruto's hair. "But even if they are located in Magnolia, we still have many people back in the guild who would be able to stop them." Natsu forced his mouth open without vomiting and looked up at Erza. "They better not be targeting us with lullaby." Lucy looked nervous as she hugged herself across the chest. "If they do, then not only people from Fairy Tail would, many other civilians would too." Gray shook his head. "As bad as this sounds, I don't think Eisenwald would waste such an opportunity to kill a mass of people. They must have some target in their minds already," said the ice mage as he closed his eyes in thought. Erza nodded at Gray's words. "Yes, there must be something they are planning." Natsu gulped and grunted. "Are we even going to find anything in Aniba's town?" asked the young man, annoyed. "They were the few months ago. The chances of us finding them there is very slim." "We don't have a choice," muttered Erza as she looked out the train window. "This is the only lead we have. So we got to stick with it." It took the group of 5 humans and 1 cat another 2 hours before they finally reached Ashibana town, and most of them had gotten enough rest to spend the next few hours browsing through the town for information. Throughout the train ride, Gray was trying to ignore the disturbing sounds of Natsu by drifting off to sleep. White, Happy, Erza, and Lucy spent their time playing around with Naruto. The boy had grown up a lot since a night ago, and in the 2 hours the few adults taught him many words. They were all surprised at how smart Naruto was. He almost instantly learned all they taught him, soon he would be able to have conversations with others. Luce muttered out Naruto as he patted Lucy's cheek as he rode in her arms. "Hello." Lucy giggled and kissed Naruto's cheek. "Hello to you too, Naruto-chan." Naruto looked over at Gray and reached over to pat him on the shoulder. "Hello, Gray," spoke the boy in a squeaky little voice. Gray smiled at the boy and patted his head. "Hello, kid," said the young man before he clapped his hands together and formed a small ice figure of a fairy tale symbol for Naruto. "Here you go, Naruto." Naruto had wide eyes as he took the ice figure from Gray. "Thank you, Gray," said the boy as he looked over at Erza. "Er-chan," cried the boy as he waved the toy around, trying to show Erza that he got a new toy to play with. Erza chuckled and kissed Naruto's head. "It's a fairy tale symbol, Naruto-chan. Someday you might have that mark on you too," said the woman with a hopeful expression. The boy held the ice shape in his hands delicately. "Fairy tale." Happy flew to Lucy and looked around. "Hey, where is Natsu?" asked the cat a little scared. Erza's eyes widened as she looked around and saw their train move down the track. "Shit," cried the young mage as she stepped forward a little. "Is Natsu still on the train?" Naruto tilted his head to the side. "And Natsu?" Gray crossed his arms and grunted in annoyance. "Damn that idiot," muttered the ice mage as he looked back at the group. "We have to go get him. With motion sickness like his, I don't know how long he's going to last on the train." Lucy and Happy nodded along worriedly. Erza nodded and sighed. "Yes, let's go find a power car. We'll need it in order to catch the train." A power car is something that harnesses magical power using a SE core to propel itself, which would turn a mage's magical energy into kinetic energy. Many towns would offer traveling mage the use of these cars when they pass by. It has already become one of the many common uses of magic throughout the world. Fortunately for the fairy tale group, Anshabana town was one of those towns, and Erza easily got her hands on one of those vehicles. Lucy and Happy were forced backwards until their backs were attached to the back of the car, and Gray was having a hard time holding onto the roof of the car so he wouldn't fall off. Naruto was the only person in the car that paid no mind of the dangers that came with traveling at such high speeds. The boy was leaning back against Lucy's chest as he laughed happily as the car barreled across the large town and towards the train station. Gray grunted as the car took a turn. "Erza!" cried the young man loudly. "You are going too fast. If you use too much of your magic you won't be able to fight later." The red-haired beauty shook her head. "We have to catch up to the train. We won't be able to fight Eisenwald without Natsu." Happy was trying to stay still as the car constantly sped up as Erza pumped more power into it, but unfortunately for the cat, Naruto wanted to see him. The boy pulled the cat over to him and hugged Happy to his chest. Naruto was abnormally strong for his age, and Happy couldn't help but try to breathe as the boy squeezed the air out of his lungs. Lucy smiled at the boy and Happy as she leaned down to kiss Naruto lightly on the head. The group suddenly heard a loud explosion just ahead of them and they looked forward to see some smoke from over the hill and a glow that resembled Natsu's flames. Gray smirked and pointed ahead. "Those are Natsu's flames." Erza nodded. "Yeah, we are close." Soon the train was in sight and everyone saw that one part of it was on fire. Erza planned to drive up right beside the train so Gray could climb on board to grab Natsu, but it was no longer needed as the young man in question suddenly blew out of the train. Gray smirked as he saw his friend safe from the blast, but that soon changed when Natsu's face crashed right into him. "God damn it, Natsu, you are such an idiot," cried Gray as he flew off the car with his hands on his forehead. Erza chuckled as she quickly stopped the car. "Good catch, Gray." Natsu rubbed his head on the ground as he looked up to see his friends. "When did you guys get here?" asked the young man with a dizzy look on his face. Lucy and Happy walked out of the car and ran over to Natsu. "Are you okay, Natsu?" asked the blonde girl as she knelt down next to the dragon slayer. "What happened? Why did you blow up the train?" Happy cradled Natsu's head with his body and hugged his best friend. Naruto stood up on the seat and leaned against the window of the car. "Natsu!" cried the boy with a big smile on his face. Natsu stood up and clapped his face. "There was a bastard on the train that was insulting Fairy Tail, so I decided to teach him a lesson," muttered the young man as he glared at the direction of the train. "I would have beaten the crap out of him if the train didn't start moving." Erza crossed her arms. "Who was it you were fighting?" The dragon slayer tilted his head in thought. Was just some guy from Eisenwald," muttered Natsu casually, but it clicked him after a few seconds. "Oh hey." Erza growled and smacked Natsu upside the back of his head. "Baka!" cried the young woman as the young man cradled his head on the ground. "We are looking for people from Eisenwald." Naruto was laughing at Natsu from where he was standing as he clapped his hands together. Gray sighed and jumped back on top of the car. "Then we must catch the train. That guy might be meeting up with the rest of his guild somewhere." Happy pulled a reluctant Natsu back into the car along with Lucy and Erza once again sat in the driver's seat. The S-class mage knew that they had to stop Eisenwald no matter what. If the Dark Guild really gotten a spell like Lullaby in their hands, they could wipe out most of the guilds in Fiori in a few days. Erza pumped a large sum of her magical power into the car and just like before the car was going too fast for the passengers' comfort. The good thing was that they were trying to follow a train. So all they had to do was to follow the train tracks to find where it is. Erza drove the car off the road and up into the hills to cut some corners of the track. She hoped that it would allow them to catch up to the train fast enough. Naruto was once again perched upon Lucy's lap as he giggled and laughed in the car. He surprised the other at how he was enjoying the fast ride so much. Natsu on the other hand was trying his best to hold in his vomit as he laid in the fetal position beside Lucy. The Dragon Slayer's main weakness was transportation. It was quite pathetic really. Gray grunted his teeth as he held on to the roof of the car. "We'll catch the train, Erza," cried the man loudly. "You have to save up on her magic if you want to fight later on." Erza shook her head. "No, can't risk not catching the train." replied the S-class mage frustrated. If we let this guy out of our sight then we may never find another lead. Erza was pushing so much energy into the car. The SE plug was swelling up from the pressure. There is no way that we can allow them to ever use lullaby anywhere. Lucy looked out of the window and heard something from afar. Hey, think I hear the train from here. Erza smirked and nodded. He think we are really close to it. The car drove over one last hill, and the fairy tale team saw their train laying motionlessly in its tracks. But the strange thing was people were being thrown out of the train along with the luggage on board. Then there was a suspicious group standing next to the train, and it was obvious that they were mages based on the magical power they send off from their bodies. Erza pulled over and jumped out of the car. She looked down at the sight and narrowed her eyes. The train robbery? Mumbled the beauty as she crossed her arms. Natsu crawled over to the edge of the hill and looked down. Hey, muttered the man as he pointed down at a man with a black ponytail. That's the guy I was fighting, was badmouthing fairy tale and was from Eisenwald. Bray jumped down beside Natsu and analyzed the group under them. So the other people are also from Eisenwald. Lucy looked nervous at the large number of people. Is their whole guild here? Erza had a dangerous look on her face as she focused on one man down below. That's Rigger Eisenwald's ace. Erigr was an extremely tall, lean-built and yet mildly muscular man with silver hair, which was held pointing upwards in spiky strands on top of his head, but hanged down to the left of his face in a distinctive tuft, sometimes partially covering it and reaching down to his shoulders. His eyes were dark and he had an elongated face with sharp features and somewhat pointed ears, but seems to lack eyebrows. His eyes were circled by dark lines, and each of them had a simple tattoo right below it, consisting of a pointed line going down vertically, crossed with two more, larger horizontal lines. The upper part of his body was similarly tattooed, but with much larger, intricate and blue-colored motifs, which take on spiraling forms and adorn his shoulders, biceps, pectorals and back. Bray grunted. So that's Erigr no Shinigami, muttered the man, intimidating Lucy and happy. Erza closed her eyes. If he is here then there is no mistaking it are Eisenwald, and they really are planning something big. The fairy tale group watched on as the Eisenwald people all got on board the train after they finished pushing everyone else off. Then once again the train was in motion. Heading over to the next town. Lucy got back in the car along with everyone else. Why would they steal a train? Wouldn't that make it too easy to track where they are? Erza heard the girl from where she was and nodded. Yes, but it does have speed and it is the most direct route from town to town. Muttered the beauty with anger in her voice. If they broadcast lullaby in every station in every town the death toll will be through the roof, so we have to stop them no matter what. The fairy tale group barreled down the highway towards the next town as fast as they could in order to hopefully catch up to the train. Just a little distance away from where they were. Ashibana town was undergoing its normal busy day. Oblivious to the fact that a vengeful horde of dark mages were headed their direction and would possibly kill most of them within minutes of their arrival. Trains were the most common way of travel in Earthland, so the stations would usually be filled with people. If Eisenwald were to attack the stations in the towns, not only would a lot of people die, the entire nation of Fiori would be in complete catastrophe. The more Erza thought about the situation the more dire it became in her mind. There were endless possibilities of what Eisenwald would do with something so powerful, and she only had so much magical power to power the car for so long. Bray looked up from where he laid. Erza! Exclaimed the man as he pointed ahead. Ashibana town is in sight, just a little more. Erza grunted. Okay. The S-class mage charged into the town without speeding down at all and barreled through all the busy streets of the town with abandon. People were scattering right and left to avoid the apparently crazed vehicle and havoc evoked in the streets. Erza had no choice but to rush to the station as fast as possible. She couldn't care about the general safety anymore, much more people would die if they failed to stop Eisenwald. Lucy blocked the wind from her eyes as she peeked her head out the window. The station is just ahead. The Ashibana station was one of the most busy stations in Fiori, but now there was a large group of people surrounding its area. There was a bunch of royal guards who were blocking off the perimeter of the station, and they attracted quite a large crowd near the station. Erza jumped out of the car and walked up to the crowd. What happened here? Muttered the woman to herself before she heard from the people around that the guards were saying that there was a derailment and the station had to be closed down. But some other people were saying that a bunch of terrorists had taken control over the station and the royal guards were trying to take back control of the station. Bray stood beside Erza with a sick Natsu on his back. They must have stopped here for some reason. Erza nodded and made her way through the crowd. This must be their first target, we have to confront them now. Ordered the S-class mage as she walked out of the crowd and towards the station. A bunch of guards saw Erza and immediately stepped forward to stop her. Erza paid them no mind and just knocked all of them out with her fists. Natsu chuckled as he was the guard all fall to the ground. Teeth at Erza for you, mumbled the pink-haired young man, still trying to not hurl. Bray grunted and started to ran after Erza. Stop moving around, you idiot. Cursed the ice mage at his friend as he sped up as much as he could. If you barf on my head I will kill you. Lucy and Happy were both back in the car watching Naruto, and both of them were silently relieved that they didn't have to follow the other three into battle. The blonde girl would rather stay in the car with the slightly annoying cat and the absolutely adorable little boy. Lucy had always wanted a younger sibling when she was younger, but her mother died and her father was kind of a jerk. But Lucy found that she could make a little brother out of Naruto. Her surrogate brother from Fairy Tail. Lucy turned to look down at the boy. Hey Naruto-chan. But all the girl saw was an empty seat and the boy was nowhere in sight. Where the hell did he go? Happy was chowing down on a fish and looked up at the catatonic girl. I thought you were holding him. Lucy died a little inside. Erza was going to kill her. Prophecy Rebirth Chapter 4. Little Naruto slowly made his way into the train station by hugging close to the wall. The crowd and the guards were busy focusing on each other, so no one really noticed the small boy sneaking his way into the battle area. The small blonde boy had a smile on his face as he crept into the station with his little legs. His balance was still not fully developed. His arms were sliding stretched out to the sides to keep his walking leveled. "Er-chan," muttered the boy as he looked around for his favorite person. Naruto had made his way into the main lobby area of the station and he heard that it was very loud. It was like there were many people running around and even some people were crying out in pain. The boy walked up to the large area and saw that there was a crowd of people running around and they all blocked his view, so he drifted off to the side and giggled as he made his way up the stairs of the side of the wall. The boy had seen Erza walked up some flights of stairs back in Fairy Hills and he had learned how to use them back then. Naruto found that he saw more and more people the higher he got, but he couldn't see Erza yet. But when he made it to the top of the stairs and reached the second floor, Naruto saw Erza with a blade in her hand. Naruto giggled and clapped his hands together. "Er-chan." The boy watched as Erza utterly defeat all the people who tried to attack her with her blades and spears. Naruto noticed that there were a lot of people fighting Erza, but there was only one Erza. The boy frowned as he stomped his foot down on the ground and pointed down at the people fighting his favorite person. Naruto instinctively clapped his hands together and felt a surge of energy from his gut. "Er-chan," muttered Naruto as he looked beside him and saw a copy of himself looking right back at him. The two boys started to giggle at each other and soon they began to laugh. The two Narutos started to run in different directions as they each created more and more clones of themselves. They were thinking that they would make enough copies so Erza would have just as much people on her side. The number of Narutos started to go completely out of control and the second floor was almost all filled with them. The boys were knocking over plants and tables as they ran all over the place in glee. The little kids started to laugh and giggle over everything as they spanned out to explore the second floor. The little pitter-patter of the boy turned into heavy stomps of 100 as all the boys ran at the same pace at the same time. "Er-chan," cried all hundreds of little Narutos in unison and their voice made the fight below them stop immediately. Erza was engrossed into fighting all the weaklings in Eisenwald first and then going after Erger. Her mind was totally committed to blocking and striking her two opponents and tried to eliminate them as quickly as possible. In the back of her mind Erza was a little worried about Naruto, but she knew that he was in the car with Lucy and Happy, so he should be fine. Erza had thought she was hallucinating at first, but she started to hear Naruto's voice calling out for her as she was fighting. It can't be Naruto-chan in the car right now, thought Titania as she slashed her blade down and forced several men in front of her to fly back against a wall. As the S-class mage was fighting she kept hearing sounds that sounded a lot like Naruto laughing and giggling, and it was becoming louder and louder for some reason. "What the hell is that?" cried one of the Eisenwald grunts as he pointed up at the second floor. Erza couldn't no longer help it and looked up to the higher level herself quickly and what she saw shocked her to the core. "Er-chan." The whole train station rumbled a little from the vibrations created by the hundreds of Narutos up on the second floor. All the little boys had a huge grin of their faces as they pushed around on the second level. It was fortunate that none of them were taller than the railing, so none of them were pushed down to the first floor. It was at this time that Lucy and Happy made it into the station and the first thing they saw was a frozen Erza as she looked above. Then the blonde girl and the cat looked up also and they were also shocked to the core at the sight of the mass amount of Narutos. The space between the railings were filled with Narutos sticking their faces through the space and waving down at his friends down below. Erza, Lucy and Happy had never seen anything like it. No one should have the power to make so many clones. "They hit Er-chan," cried all the clones at the same time as they all started to jump from the second floor and down to the many men with weapons in their hands. The Eisenwald people were all shocked and staggered back a little at the sight of hundreds of kids jumping for them. "What the hell is this?" Erza, Lucy and Happy all watched as the huge swarm of Narutos completely covered the crowd of Eisenwald and the kids' way crushed some of them unconscious. The Narutos started to crawl onto the taller men and pulled their hair, pinched their ears, and even punched their heads repeatedly. There were too many kids yelling and speaking at the same time, so the fairy tale group had no idea what they were saying. Lucy had her jaw on the ground as she shakily pointed over at the battle. What the hell is happening? How did Naruto-chan do this? Erza was equally shocked, and no matter how hard she tried she could reason her way out of it. I have no idea. Baraka, one of the higher-ups of Eisenwald, staggered back in shock as his men were all put out of commission by a bunch of kids. "You bunch of fools, just hit the kids back," cried the man before he too was pulled into the enormous swarm of kids. The men nodded and started to hit back at the kids, but when they did the kids just poofed into a cloud of smoke. More and more clones were being dispelled, and the cloud in the area completely blocked the view of the men in the fight. The remaining Naruto were still pounding away at the temples and groins of the men, and one by one they all fell. When the smoke cleared, almost all the men were down, and there were still quite a few of Narutos left. "No hitting Er-chan," cried several Narutos as they kicked the faces of the men who were already on the ground. Baraka was the only one who was still moving, and he bolted out of the room as fast as he could. Erza was still in awe and slowly walked one step closer. "Naruto-chan." At the sound of Erza's voice, all the Narutos smiled and started to run towards her, but they all tripped over the bodies of the Eisenwald men, and most of them poofed out of existence. There was only one Naruto left, and he was the original. He kept running after he got up and jumped right into Erza's opened arms. "Er-chan," cried the boy as he nuzzled closer to Erza despite her armor. Erza looked around at the fallen men and at the boy who was giggling in her arms and chuckled. Kami choked out Erza as she started to laugh. Naruto-chan defeated all of those men. Lucy and Happy also laughed at the scene despite the situation. It was just too funny. The army of one of the largest dark guilds in Fiori was just clobbered by a 2-year-old boy and his hundreds of clones. They had no idea how the boy did it and what he did, but it was certainly very helpful. It was a shock that the men in Eisenwald were so weak. The boys managed to beat them by landing on them and repeatedly decking them in the face. Naruto wiggled in Erza's arms and smiled at her while placing a hand on her cheek. "Er-chan okay?" Erza smiled at the thought that Naruto was just trying to protect her and unlocked some sort of magic. "Yes, Naruto-chan," muttered the young woman as she kissed Naruto's cheek. "Er-chan is perfectly fine." The S-class mage had a beautiful smile on her face as she cradled the boy close to her chest, and she slowly turned back to face the others. Lucy smiled at the heartwarming sight. "Naruto-chan really loves you, Erza." The S-class mage nodded as she ruffled Naruto's hair. "Yes, he does, but on a side note," said Erza as she turned back to Lucy and Happy. "Why the hell did you two let Naruto-chan out of your sight?" cried the young woman, furiously making Happy and Lucy jump back a pail. "He slipped right out of the car after you," stuttered Lucy as she looked down on the ground. Sorry, Erza." Happy just nodded along, too scared to speak himself. Erza grunted and turned away. "You two better not do anything like that again," mumbled the S-class mage as she started her way to the terminal area. "Or else." Gray was running down one of the many hallways of the station, trying to find where Erza had escaped to, but he was not having any luck at all. He and Natsu had decided to part ways when there was a split end a few minutes ago, but there seemed to be nothing on his end of the station. The ice mage had heard something very loud back out in the lobby a few minutes ago and had no idea what it was, but it sounded vaguely like Naruto yelling. The young mage shook his head. There is no way that the kid made it out of the car with Lucy and Happy, both there, thought the man as he turned another corner. Gray was getting more and more desperate as he ran down the hallways in search of a man that could kill hundreds of people in under a minute. Lullaby was far too great of a threat to be in the hands of something like Erza, and there is no telling what the slightly crazed man would do with such evil magic. The ice mage knew that he had to find Erza soon, or many people would die from Lullaby. "Damn it," cursed Gray inwardly as he tried to sense the presence of Erza and found nothing. But there was a door up ahead that caught the young man's attention. Broadcast room. Will Erza be planning to play the flute over the intercom? Gray's terror came to life when the signal of an intercom broadcast came through all the speakers in the station. Somian was about to broadcast something. Gray busted through the door of the broadcast room with a glare in his eyes. Ready to freeze Erza to death the moment he saw him, but it was not what he saw. There was a slight feedback that played through the whole station, but what came out after was not a lullaby. "Er-chan?" spoke a curious Naruto as he held the mic in his hands. "Where is Er-chan?" The sound of Naruto's babbling sounded through the whole station as Gray just stood at the door with his jaw dropped. What are you doing in here, kid?" Naruto smiled when he saw Gray and waved at him. "Hello, Gray," exclaimed the boy as his childish voice sounded through the whole station again. Gray started to walk up to Naruto, but then the latter saw someone behind Gray. Behind Gray. The ice mage then sensed it and quickly turned around. His eyes widened when a black strap suddenly whipped him in the face and sent him barreling back. Gray's eyes widened when he saw that he was going to crash into Naruto and quickly twisted his body as much as he could. But even so, Gray's body crashed into the stool Naruto was standing on and the kid was falling to the ground. "Ahhh!" cried the boy as he hit the ground. Gray's eyes widened again and quickly got to his feet. "Naruto." But before the man could reach the boy, his body suddenly disappeared with a poof of smoke. Erza, along with Naruto, Lucy and Happy were all heading towards the largest balcony of the station. It was a deck that stretched out towards the streets and it had a clear view of all the people that have gathered below. There was a huge threat that Erza would try to use Lullaby to kill everyone in the vicinity, and the first thing they had to do was evacuate the area to decrease as much hostages as Erza could hold. Erza was holding a magic voice amplifier in her hands as she walked up and looked down at the swarm of people. The crowd below have seemed to notice Erza's presence and started to quiet down to see if the young woman had anything to say to them. "Everyone," started Erza with an authoritative voice. "Dark mages have taken over the station and they have the power to kill everyone in this area." The people below started to look nervous and scared. "Quickly scatter away from the station if you value your lives." One by one the message became clear to the civilians and they all started to run away from the station. It was chaos and havoc, people were running all over the place and many stands and shops were trampled over by the hysteric mass of people. Erza sighed in relief. Chaos was much better than the entire city center being filled with dead bodies of the civilians. The situation had become a lot better as Erza no longer had a mass amount of people in one place that he could use as hostages. Lucy held Naruto in her arms as she frowned. "What do we do now?" Happy was hovering beside Lucy and shook his head. "We should meet up with Natsu and Gray to see if they found anything." Erza's eyes suddenly widened as she quickly turned back to the main building of the station. Much to her shock, there was a large wall of swirling wind surrounding the building. Lucy and Happy were also in awe at the sight. By the looks of it, the people outside wouldn't be able to go in and the people inside would be trapped within. "So you fairy tale pests got rid of all the people around the station, huh?" muttered an eerie voice from above. Erza glared up at Erza, who was looking down at her with a smirk on his face. "What now, Erza? You no longer hold any hostages," muttered the S-class mage with anger in her voice. "Come down here and fight me." Erza chuckled and shook his head. "I wish I can, Erza-san, I have always wanted to fight one of the S-class mages of Fairy Tail," muttered the man as he landed on the ground without a sound. "But I am on a tight schedule today and don't have the time." Erza raised his hand up and shot a blast of wind at Erza before she could react. Erza was launched backwards towards the wall of wind. The young woman slipped right into the wall without any trouble. But she was now separated from her group. Lucy and Happy were both shocked that Erza was thrown back so easily. "Erza-san," cried the blonde girl as she herself stepped closer to the wall. "Are you alright?" Happy saw Erza raise his hand again behind Lucy's back. "Lucy, look out," cried the cat as he sped towards Lucy and tried to push her out of the way. The blonde girl was surprised and jumped and she accidentally released Naruto from her arms. Happy and Lucy were both blown back into the wind wall while Naruto was on the ground holding a sore arm. The boy got up on his feet and looked back in the wind wall. "And Lucy," mumbled Naruto as tears welled in his eyes. Erza appeared behind Naruto, shocking the boy and made him stagger backwards. "So you are the boy who messed up my men and screwed up a part of my plan," muttered the tall man as he grinned down menacingly at Naruto. "What should I do with you?" Lucy and Happy had looks of horror on their face as Erza was flaring her aura violently. "If you lay one finger on him, I will hunt you down and kill you." Erza chuckled as he looked over at Erza. "What are you going to do about it, Titania? You can't even get out of that barrier." Naruto looked up at the frightening man as he sobbed. "Er-chan." Erza felt extremely desperate as Erza neared Naruto. "Naruto-chan," cried the young woman as she slashed her blade against the wind wall as hard as she could, but she was pushed back. Then she had an idea. "Naruto-chan, run towards me." She realized that if Naruto made it to her side of the wall, at least he would have her to protect him. Naruto started to walk towards Erza, but Erza picked him up by his shirt. "Oh no, you don't, you little brat," grunted the man as he held Naruto to his face. "Naruto-chan," cried Erza desperately. Erza started to laugh as he swung Naruto round in his grasp. "Are you angry, little guy?" asked the man as he saw that Naruto was glaring at him. "Are you angry that I hurt Erza over there? But there is nothing you can do about it, you little bastard." Naruto was angry, could feel something tingle in his gut again and it was becoming stronger and stronger. The wind dark mage continued to laugh as he flung the boy left and right. "You know what, maybe I should hit Erza again. Will you be even more mad if I did that?" "And no hitting Er-chan," whispered the boy as his rage built up. Erza chuckled and smacked Naruto on the head. "What did you say, boy? Talk louder." Erza was looking at the scene with absolute fury in her eyes. If she ever got out of the wind wall, she promised herself that no matter what she would rip Erza to pieces. Naruto's body suddenly glowed a bright blue as a strange aura radiated off of him. "No hitting Chan," cried the boy as he released his anger and kicked Erza right in TH's face. Erza, Lucy and Happy were all in sudden shock as they saw Erza being knocked to the ground by Naruto. Erza knew that it was a very hard kick. Naruto was being held in the air by Erza, so he had no ground to support to his strength, but his kick still knocked a man who was many times heavier than him to the ground. The reason was the speed behind the kick. Naruto's kick was so fast that even with his light weight, he still forced Erza to the ground. Erza was shocked himself as he got back up to his feet. "Why you brat?" cried the man as he held his very sore jaw. Boy may have cracked some of his bones. Naruto's body was still glowing a soft blue as power surged through his body. He was gripping his fists together very tightly and clenched his jaws together like a vice grip. "Stop," muttered the boy softly as he looked up at Erza with no more tears in his eyes. "Stop hurting my Chan," cried the boy as loud as he could as he placed all his power in one jump. Erza's eyes widened in shock as he saw the boy speed towards him at blinding speeds. Naruto's body crashed straight into Erza's chest and the man cried out in pain. Erza was launched from where he was and straight into a building wall. The man's body created several deep cracks in the wall and he himself was extremely winded. Erza was coughing painfully on all fours as he felt some of his ribs were broken and his lung was almost fractured. The man looked back at the kid who was also on his all fours in shock. Kid was not human, not normal. Kid could have ever done what he just did. Lucy and Happy both had their jaws on the ground after they saw the condition of Erza after the hit. Little Naruto just landed a huge strike on the most powerful mage in Eisenwald. Erza was even more shocked than the others since she was the closest to Naruto. She couldn't believe that Naruto could generate so much power. She had never felt magic like his before. Even though it was not an overwhelming amount of magical power, but Erza had never sensed anything nearly as potent and palpable as Naruto's aura. The boy's power was enough to completely throw off Erza's disposition and launched him into a wall it shouldn't even be possible. Naruto slowly got back up to his little feet and looked around with a whimper. "Chan." Erza quickly ran up to the wall. "Naruto-chan, come to Chan," cried the young woman loudly. "I'm over Harakim here." The boy looked back to see Erza and he once again had tears in his eyes. "Chan," cried the boy as he ran as fast as he could to his precious Chan. This time Erza couldn't catch Naruto as he was still on the ground and the boy made it across the wind wall. With a loud sob Naruto jumped into the opened arms of Erza and hugged her as tight as he could with his little arms. The boy was crying from all the shock he experienced in the last few minutes and he was shaking. Erza reached out for Naruto as soon as he was past the wind wall and hugged him tightly against her chest. A great sense of relief came across Erza as she once again held the boy in her arms again. He was finally safe from Erza. Erza had almost never been so afraid in her life when she thought Erza was going to kill Naruto. Some tears actually escaped her left eye. Erza ran her fingers through Naruto's hair as both her and Naruto's breathing leveled out. Lucy smiled at the sight and scooted over to them. "Erza-san." Happy hovered over Naruto and patted his head. "Naruto, you are strong too." Erza pulled back a little and found that Naruto had fallen asleep in her arms. Finally tired from all the things he had done. "Sleep for now, Naruto-chan is here with you." It has been 4 hours since Naruto had fallen asleep and the fairy tale group was once again in a car. Many things have happened since then and Erza was very relieved that the boy had slept through the whole thing. In the end it was Natsu who had defeated Erza. It was very good news, but Erza was a little angry that she didn't get to pummel the man into a pile of minced meat or a pincushion. After what the man did to Naruto, Erza wanted to kill the man for good measure. Then it was a man named Kageyama who stole Lullaby from them and headed towards Clover Town. Apparently, Eisenwald had been planning to target the guild leaders meeting from the start. They only took over the train station so they could stop others from going to Clover Town. But the weak-minded and not entirely evil man was persuaded by Master Makarov to not play the flute and gave himself up for his crimes. But no one expected the flute to then turn into a monster, some living magic that was created by Zeref many years ago. It was a difficult and risky bet, but Erza, Natsu and Gray managed to destroy Lullaby for good. Though Clover Town was devastated after the battle, and the worst part is that the fairy tale group made more damage than Lullaby. Now the fairy tale group was traveling back to Magnolia using the handy magic car, but this time it was Gray who was driving. Naruto's eyes twitched as he wiggled around. "Chan," mumbled the boy as he finally rested enough. The people in the car were all happy that the boy was okay and finally woke up. Erza smiled brightly at the boy's voice and hugged him closer to her. The S-class mage had changed back to her regular buttoned-up blouse and blue scarf, so Naruto wouldn't have to sleep against her hard armor. Naruto nuzzled against Erza as he wrapped his arms around her neck instinctively. The boy was still a little scared from his run-in with Erza and wanted to be close to his Chan. Erza rubbed Naruto's back with a smile on her face. We are going home now, Naruto-chan, just keep resting, okay? Makarov smiled at the sight of her surrogate daughter be so tender and loving to the boy. So this little boy actually did all that? Asked the master as the group just finished telling him Naruto's exploits. That is very hard to believe. I've never heard of such a young boy being so powerful. Lucy nodded with a smile. We know it's hard to believe, but we all saw it with our own eyes. Exclaimed the girl excitedly. Naruto-chan made hundreds of clones and trampled almost every one of Eisenwald's men by himself. Erza nodded proudly. Gayhand, he managed to knock Erza down twice. He had the most peculiar kind of magic I have ever felt. Said the woman softly as she patted Naruto's head. Makarov studied the boy as he wiggled around in Erza's arms. Naruto was once again his curious self and scooted closer to the extremely sick Natsu, who was laying down beside Erza. The boy giggled and started to poke the ill dragon slayer's face. Lucy, Erza and Happy all smiled and laughed at the sight. The master started to smile himself as he looked at the boy who brought quite a bit of joy to his children. Well, then we'll ask Mira-chan to place a guild mark on Naruto when we get back. Said the old man as the others looked over at him happily. If this boy could really do all that, then he would be a perfect fit in Fairy Tail. Erza couldn't agree more and had a bright smile on her face. Hey, thank you, master. Prophecy Rebirth Chapter 5. The Fairy Tail group had finally arrived back in Magnolia after a day of arduous car travel, and they couldn't be happier to be home. Natsu had been constantly groaning and rolling around in the car, so the group was very glad the young man was no longer annoying them with his slightly pathetic case of motion sickness. Though Naruto had a great time playing with an out-of-commission Natsu on the car, he would constantly be poking him in the face and laughing at the funny expression that would come onto his face. Erza and Lucy had an equally nice time just looking at the cute happy boy. Naruto had truly brought them a lot of joy. Since the thought of losing Naruto passed through Erza's mind a few hours ago, she had become much more attached to the boy than before. The S-class mage didn't know why, but Naruto had already become a very important part of her life and she didn't want to lose him to anyone. Gray and Happy mostly just slept through the whole trip back, but Master Makarov was taking his time observing Naruto. The old man had seen many young mages before in his life, but never one so young. It may not be accurate to consider Naruto a mage yet, but the boy definitely had some sort of magical power, and it was very strong considering his age. And if what Erza and Lucy said was true, which Makarov believed they were, Naruto's magical power would increase to an even higher level if he was stuck in intense situations. The master was curious and excited to see what the boy can truly do, so he was glad to accept him as the newest member of Fairy Tail. Erza once again held Naruto in her arms, and both she and the boy had smiles on their faces. We'll get you your guild mark when we get back, Naruto-chan. Chirped Erza as she rocked the boy in her arms. I'm sure Mira would be very happy to give one to you. Lucy chuckled and nodded. Not only Thatch would also be very relieved that Naruto-chan was actually with us. Said the blonde young woman with a smile on her face. Mira-san might still be looking all over for Naruto-chan. Bray nodded with a small laugh. Knowing Mira-chan, she would have flipped the entire guild to look for the kid. The master, along with few of the most powerful mages of Fairy Tail, walked into their guild and they were greeted with the usual festive laughter. As usual, there were many people in the guild enjoying their early drink of sake and everyone was having a nice time just strolling around the guild. Most of them should really be working on missions, but the day was perfect for drinking and partying. Erza was pointing out things to Naruto, who was looking around with his usual enthusiasm and curiosity. Lucy and Gray were both surprised at how loving and affectionate Erza was being to Naruto. Gray had known Erza since they were very young children and he had never seen this side of Erza before. No one in the guild had ever seen Erza being so affectionate. Befrish was usual plain strict and authoritative. Master? Greeted Elfman as he grinned down at the old man. It's nice to have you back. Makarov nodded with his hands behind his back. It is good to be back. Guild is as lively as ever. Elfman nodded and smirked. Yes, it's a man. Natsu sweat dropped. I don't even know what that means, thought the man as he looked over at Happy, who nodded at him. Anna walked up to the group with a smile on her face and a drink in her hands. Well, Naruto-chan was with you all this time. Mira had been ripping her own hair out trying to find him, muttered the young woman with a slightly flustered face because of the sake. You better show him to her before she starts to look for him in other towns and cities. Erza looked guilty and sighed as she held her fists out. I'm sorry, it is my fault for not telling her earlier. Muttered Erza dramatically as she furrowed her eyebrows. Please pinch me. The group sweat dropped at Erza's catchphrase, but before anyone could say anything else, a loud screech pierced the ears of everyone in the guild. Naru-chan. Cried Mirahin with tears in her eyes as she sped towards Erza at blinding speeds. Erza watched in shock as the other S-class mage snatched Naruto from her arms and started to smother him in her ample breasts. Most of the men in the guild looked at Naruto with jealousy as Elfman just shook his head. Ni-chan. Murahin was hugging the life out of Naruto as she twisted around in joy. "You scared me a lot, Naruto-chan. Thought you ran away from the guild or someone kidnapped you," exclaimed the beautiful model of fairy tale as she ignored all the stares of shock and awe. "Let me look at you. Are you hurt at all?" cried the young woman as she was scared that Naruto was hurt while traveling around with Natsu and Gray. Erza saw that Naruto was having difficulty to breath and was worried. "Hey Mireyu, should loosen your grip." Murahin looked up at her friend and did loosen her grip. "Erza-chan," cried the woman with a little anger, surprising many people in the guild. "Why didn't you tell me you took Naruto-chan on the mission though? You know how worried I was." Erza was a little sorry, but it was Naruto who followed her. "Hey, I didn't just bring him along with me, he climbed onto my luggage and followed me to the train station." The white-haired lady huffed and turned around and walked back to her counter. "Whatever, let's get you something to eat, Naru-chan." Erza was shaking in anger as her rival just took Naruto away from her. "Damn it, Murahin," cried the S-class mage in anger as she was about to jump at Murahin. Everyone was intimidated by both Erza and Mirajanovan, though the latter had extremely mellowed out in the last 2 years, she was still one of the most powerful mages in the guild, and if she was to fight with Erza again like they would a few years back, the guild would certainly be destroyed. Thankfully the master present and he didn't even want to think that Erza and Murahin's rivalry would become active again. "That's enough," ordered the master as everyone was silent. Mira and Erza both calmed down. "Mira-chan, after you feed Naruto we will give him an official Fairy Tail Guild mark. From now on he is an official member of Fairy Tail." Murahin had a huge smile on her face along with many other people in the guild. "Hi master," chirped a happy Murahin. Erza and her group walked over to the bar where Murahin was feeding Naruto some oatmeal. Natsu, Lucy and Happy all ordered something for themselves as they were also very hungry from the long trip. Gray and Erza were just sitting across from Naruto on the table as they watched the boy eat. Or just Murahin trying to feed Naruto. For some reason Naruto wouldn't eat the oatmeal at all and was pushing Murahin's hand away from him. It made Erza quite happy. Murahin frowned and patted Naruto's head. "Why don't you like oatmeal, Naru-chan? It's good for you." Naruto shook his head and pointed over to the bowl of ramen Natsu was eating. "That's it." Erza smiled and ruffled Naruto's hair. "Do you want some ramen, Naruto-chan?" asked a red-haired beauty as she ordered another order on ramen from another waitress. Naruto looked up at Erza a little confused as he tried to say the word. Ramen. Murahin giggled at the boy's cuteness and quickly got the other bowl of ramen from the kitchen, ignoring the fact that someone else had ordered the ramen before Naruto. Murahin and Erza both watched as Naruto scoot closer to the large bowl of noodles by himself and reached for the pair of chopsticks on the bowl. The bowl held on stick in each hand and looked utterly cute when he had a very confused look on his face, had absolutely no idea how to use them. Erza quickly grabbed a pair of chopsticks before Murahin did with a smirk on her face. "I'll feed you, Naruto-chan," announced the woman happily as she gave Murahin a victorious grin. Murahin pouted and glared a little over at Erza as she watched Naruto happily slurp down the noodles with a smile on his face. Lucy giggled as she paused her own lunch. "Naruto-chan sure likes the ramen," said the girl as she giggled harder when the boy pointed over at a piece of BBQ pork and tried to get Erza Rio feed him it. Erza giggled herself, which was a shock to everyone who heard her. "Here you go, Naruto-chan," chirped the S-class mage as she fed Naruto the BBQ pork. Naruto had a bright smile on her face as he used his little teeth to chew as fast as he could. Natsu was already finished his lunch and jumped up from his seat excitedly. "Yosh!" exclaimed the young man as he punched his fists up to the air. "Naruto!" cried Natsu as he shocked Lucy and the other from his loud voice. Erza glared over at Natsu. "Shut the hell up, Natsu, Naruto-chan is eating." For once Erza's intimidation did not work and Natsu just jumped onto the bar table as well and sat himself right next to Naruto. "Hey Naruto, can you teach me how you made that clone?" asked the young man with a grin on his face. "I really want to learn it. If I can have more than one me in a fight, I can finally beat the crap out of Erza, Mystigan and even Laxus," cried Natsu loudly as he shook in anticipation. "Then maybe Jai-chan would finally make me a S-class magic. Can you please teach me?" Naruto just continued to chew on his noodles happily and urged Erza to feed him faster. Natsu continued to stare at Naruto with a huge smile as everyone else sweat dropped. "Whoa, just plain ignored you, Natsu," said an amused Gray with his arms crossed. Natsu clapped his hands together before he patted Naruto's head. "Come on, Naruto, teach me." Anna and Elfman walked up to the bar curiously. "What clone thing are you talking about, Natsu? Can Naruto-chan use magic already?" asked Kana as the rest of the guild caught onto her words and looked over. It was almost unheard of for a child so young to be using magic at all. Gray nodded with a smirk and walked closer to Naruto. "Yeeth kid here made hundreds of clones on the mission and just tramples many men from Eisenwald." The sound of a needle being dropped out be heard because of the sheer silence in the guild. Gray looked back at the crowd and nodded. "Seriously, I'm not lying." Erza smirked and decided to let Naruto show off a little. "Hey Naruto-chan, can you show me how to make a clone again?" asked the red-haired beauty lovingly as Naruto stopped eating right when he heard his favorite person's voice. "I want to try to learn it again." Everyone was looking at the boy, including the master who had not seen the boy's power yet. Naruto had his mouth open as he clapped his hands together. Then suddenly a poof appeared beside the boy, and when the smoke cleared, there was an exact copy of him. Both Naruto had smiles on their faces as they looked up at Erza. Murahin, Elfman and Kana, along with everyone else in the guild, were in shock at the boy. They had never seen anyone making a clone without any sort of element, especially not a little boy that couldn't even talk properly yet. The master himself was surprised at the boy. Based on his own sensory skills, he felt that Naruto had essentially split his energy in half when he made the clone, meaning the clone possessed half his power. If the boy really made hundreds of clones, then his magical power must be off the charts. Natsu smiled brightly and held the real Naruto up in the air. "Please teach me how to do that, Naruto." Naruto giggled in the arms of Natsu but didn't say anything back. Lucy chuckled and patted Natsu's shoulder. "I don't think Naruto-chan can teach you when he can't even have conversations with people yet." Murahin nodded and took the chance to snatch Naruto into her arms. "Yep, and it is time to give Naru-chan his guild mark," chirped the model as the clone of the Naruto started to reach for the Raymond himself. "Where do you want the mark, Naru-chan?" The boy looked over at Erza who was smiling at him. "Mark here," mumbled the boy as he pointed to his own left arm. Erza smiled proudly as Murahin happily stamped the magic mark on the boy, and a few seconds later a blue fairy tail mark that was identical to Erza appeared on Naruto's arm. "There you go, Naru-chan, you are officially the youngest member of Fairy Tail." Naruto smiled and waved his arms around. Fairy Tail. Making everyone in the guild smile at his childish innocence. A little away from the eastern forest of Magnolia was a little medical treehouse that was the home of an old friend of Makarov. Totsuka used to be an active member of Fairy Tail, but she has resorted to being their medical advisor. Erza had told the master about Naruto's rapid and random growth overnight, and the master had decided to ask Totsuka for her knowledge, since he himself had no idea what was going on with Naruto. Erza and Naruto, along with the master, Natsu, Kana, Lucy and Murahin, all went looking for the slightly intimidating medical advisor together. People may find the old pink-haired lady to be cranky and sometimes even bipolar, but Erza had always found her to be one of her most respected people. It was Totsuka who gave Erza an artificial eyes after she lost hers during the darkest part of her childhood, so she had complete faith that the old lady would have some idea about what was going on with Naruto. Makarov sighed as he came upon a familiar sight. "We're here." Erza nodded and led the way into the treehouse. "Excuse me, Totsuka-san," called out the S-class mage as she entered the house after knocking a few times. "What is it now?" came a cranky voice from inside the house. Totsuka was a slim and tall elderly woman with pink hair, tied in a bun on the back of her head by two large pins with crescent moon-shaped edges, and with two bangs of hair left that framed her face. She had reddish eyes, and a beauty mark located below her mouth. On the left side of her attire consisted of a dark green blouse with a tie around the collar, paired with a long matching skirt and simple shoes. Over this, she sported a crimson-colored cape with a wide collar decorated by massive dragon horn-like decorations protruding outwards and edges adorned by white arch-like motifs. Makarov walked up to face his lifelong friend. "Hey Totsuka, I need your advice for something," said the man as he gestured to Naruto who was still in Erza's arms. Erza walked up to her childhood savior. "Please take a look at him, Totsuka-san," said the young woman with a concerned look on her face. "Can you see if there is anything wrong with him?" Totsuka took the boy from Erza and held him outwardly in her arms, and the boy just looked up at the lady with a small smile on her face. "I don't see anything out of the ordinary. Do you think there is something wrong with him?" Makarov looked over at Erza, and the latter nodded at the master. Erza then retold everything from the point when she met Naruto to his rapid growth and his sudden power boosts. Most people in the room had heard the whole story before, and some had even experienced it, but when they heard it again it was truly surreal and phenomenal. Totsuka herself had to admit that it was quite the tale, and she wondered what she would find when she inspected the boy's body. Makarov sighed and crossed his arms. "This boy has quite a lot of potential if I must say, but I need to know if he will one day just age into an old man." Erza was very worried and nervous about the answer and wanted nothing more than to take Naruto back into her arms from the old lady. Totsuka nodded and laid Naruto down on the table. "Let us find out," muttered the old lady as she took of the small shirt of the boy. The medical specialist went through the default inspection of the human body of the boy and she made sure to be extra careful and assertive. The lady checked the muscles of the boy, the vein and arteries, even the eyes of the boy, but she couldn't anything out of the ordinary. Naruto was a perfectly healthy boy in his adolescence. "When was the last time Naruto had a long sleep?" asked the lady as she looked at Erza. The red-haired beauty looked serious. "Just about 2 hours ago, slept all the way back with us in the car." Ryusuke had a soft smile on her face when she heard that. Akei can't find anything that is out of the ordinary about this boy, he is perfectly healthy, and his muscle development is even better than the average child his age. Started to explain the medic as the fairy tale group listened on. Now about his sudden growth here is some plausible explanation I can come up with. Murahin held her hands to her chest worried. What is it? The old lady held the boy in her arms. When I checked his magical power I found that his magic origin is not even half full, said the medic as everyone were surprised. Boy was already immensely powerful for his age, but his origin was not even full. Normally humans would regain their magical reserves during their sleep, and since the boy had just finished his sleep, this is about as much as his magic can current collect. Natsu cocked his head to the side. You mean he can only use a little bit of his magic reserves? Lucy looked concerned for her surrogate brother. What does that mean? The old lady nodded affirmatively. Yes, it seems that every time he gains back a portion of his energy his body would have to grow to accommodate his power, said Ryusuke as she handed the boy back to Erza. I have never seen anything like this, but Naruto here is not a little boy. Erza was getting more nervous. What are you saying, Ryusuke-san? The medic sat down in her chair and crossed her legs. It seems the Naruto here had been reverted back to his infant form for some reason, and his vast energy was sealed inside him, explained the old woman, as everyone else was shocked. His sudden growth spurts are caused by him unlocking portions of his power, so when he gains back all his power he should start to grow normally. Makarov nodded at his friend's words. So one day Naruto will eventually grow back to who he was originally, and then he would start to age like a normal person. Poor Ryusuke nodded and sighed. Yes, but when that time comes he would no longer be a child, he would be as old as he was when he was originally sealed. Anna stepped forward a little. Do you know how old that would be, poor Ryusuke-san? The old lady closed her eyes in the thought for a few seconds. Based on how old he is now and how much space is left in his reserves, would assume that he would be about 20 years of age. Natsu grinned and clapped his hands together. That's great, then he would be about the same age as us. Erza held Naruto tighter against herself and kissed the top of his head. How long would it take him to revert back to his original state? Ryusuke shook her head negatively. I have not the slightest clue, Erza, it can be a few months, but it also can be a few years. There is nothing that suggests an actual number, said the old lady as she stood up to face her visitors. But then again, this is all a theory. Makarov closed his eyes and sighed. Is there a way to test this theory? Erza and Murahin both walked forward a little as Ryusuke nodded. Well, I can use a spell that might be able to cause the boy to automatically regain some of his power. This is usually used to help mages that are almost in magic depletion, but the idea is the same. Murahin was concerned and frowned. Will it be enough to completely revert him back to normal? Erza and the others were also on the edge for the answer. The medic shook her head and shrugged. I don't think so, this spell only forces the patient to regain all of his current magical power, and that will push that person reserve a little wider. If my theory is correct, that after this Naruto should grow just a little, said the lady as she neared Naruto and placed him on the table again. Okay Naruto, sit still now. Ryusuke's hands glowed a bright white as she lowered her hands to Naruto's head. Erza and the others' eyes widened at the sight of Naruto suddenly glowing a bright blue. Ryusuke herself was shocked at the sight, as it is not what usually happens. Everyone in the room watched on in shock and amazement as Naruto's glowing body grow and stretch in front of their eyes. The boy's little height grew taller and taller, and Makarov felt the boy's magical power continue to rise quickly as he grew. Ryusuke tried to push the spell as much as she could, but soon she felt that Naruto's body was starting to reject her spell, meaning that it was the most she could do. The light died down, and everyone was anxious to see how Naruto was. Erza was feeling more nervous than she had ever been, and she was gripping her fists until her knuckles were white. "Er-chan?" said the voice of Naruto, but it was obviously not as childish as before. Erza and the others' eyes widened in shock as they saw Naruto that looked to be almost 6 years old. His blonde hair had grown longer, so he had a full head of thick spiky hair with 2 longer bangs framing the sides of his face. His facial structures were also much more focused and angled, but his blue eyes remained the same as before. The small shirt he was dressed was busted apart, and his long pants were on the verge of busting open and were more like shorts. The little sneakers he was wearing were just ripped into 2 and just laid beside Naruto's feet. Erza walked up to the boy with shock still on her face. Hey Naruto-chan, how are you feeling? Naruto was a little clueless, but eventually nodded his head. I am okay. Murahin, Lucy and Kana all walked up beside Erza and looked down at the boy amazed. You've grown so much again, Naruto-chan, said the best drinker in the guild as she ruffled the thick mane of hair. Lucy and Murahin both knelt down to the table's height and smiled at Naruto. Do you feel anything different, Naruto-chan? Asked a blonde girl with a smile. Naruto smiled at the 2 ladies. Lucy mirror. The girls giggled at the boy and each kissed him on the cheek. You are so smart, Naruto-chan. praised the poster girl of the guild as she ruffled his hair. Erza reached down with her arms and lifted Naruto into her arms. He was much heavier than before. "We should go back now," said the S-class mage to the others before he turned back to Naruto. "Let's go home now, Naruto-chan." Like when he was younger, Naruto wrapped his arms around Erza's neck and snuggled against her. "Okay." Erza thanked poor Totsuka for her help and walked out of the house along with Natsu and the other girls. Murahan saw the small smile on Erza's face and really couldn't tell if she was happy or not. They all knew that Erza had been seeing Naruto as a little brother, so she might be sad that he would grow up really fast and soon he won't need her anymore. But all the girls had an idea that Naruto would never leave Erza even if he was just a boy. At the moment he showed the utmost urge to protect Erza. There was something else holding the two of them together, there was some special bond between them. Makarov lingered back a little longer and looked back at his old friend. "You said that Naruto was sealed into his infant form by Summoneidos, that mean he would start to regain some memories as well?" Ryusuke crossed her arms and shrugged. "I don't know, Makarov, but I really don't think so," said the lady as she sat down in her seat again. "He has been growing for a while already, but he still talks like a child, that suggests that he has no memory of whoever he was before he was sealed." The master nodded. "Is it possible that his memories were also sealed for some reason?" The medic shrugged again. "I don't see why not, but the question here is why was Naruto sealed in the first place?" suggested the lady as she narrowed her eyes. "It is much easier to kill someone than to seal them, and Erza found him in some ancient ruins that could date back thousands of years. Could it be possible that he was actually sealed way back then?" Makarov rubbed his temples. "That is really a tough question, but if that is really true and someone really went through all the trouble to seal him in that monolith, then Naruto must have been someone very important back then." Erza had brought Naruto back to her own home in Fairy Hills after walking back from the forest. She didn't have the energy to bring Naruto back to the guild after he had grown another few years. There would be too many questions to answer and would be really annoying. On the way back, Naruto had fallen asleep in her arms and his breathing sort of made Erza feel sleepy as well. So right when Erza got home, she got into the shower herself while she placed Naruto outside on the couch still asleep. Erza got out of the shower in her pink pajamas and saw that Naruto was still sleeping. "I guess I can give him a bath in the morning." The S-class mage lifted Naruto into her arms and walked over to her bed. The crib no longer fitted Naruto, so she was just going to share her bed with him. Erza sighed as she enjoyed the cold and crisp sheets against her body and lifted a blanket over them both. Naruto mumbled a little in his sleep and snuggled closer to Erza. "Here-chan." Erza smiled at Naruto's small voice and wrapped her arms around him. "Good night, Naruto-chan," whispered the young woman as she held Naruto close to her chest and closed her eyes. "Er-chan is right here with you." The end. Prophecy Rebirth Chapter 6. It has been 1 week since Naruto had joined Fairy Tail and the guild had been even more lively with the happy child. It has been a long time since the older generation in the guild had included a child in the guild. There was Romeo, but he was a mage's son, so it was different. Erza had taken a week off from mission to help Naruto accommodate the boy to the guild and so far it was going very well. Many people had taken a liking to Naruto and the boy had received many gifts in the first week. Lucy, Murahan, Kana and Levi had bought the young boy several plushies to play with. Natsu and Gray didn't like that Naruto was playing with dolls, so they each bought him some toy weapons. Gray bought Naruto a plastic sword and Natsu bought him a toy bow and arrow. Erza herself had bought Naruto an entire wardrobe of clothes, ranges from the sizes of kids to adult just in case Naruto randomly grew again. Titania herself had been a little confused about whether or not she wanted Naruto to revert to his original age, as he might not need her anymore. But after a few days of contemplating, Erza had came to the conclusion that she would look forward to meeting the true Naruto and hope that he would still need her then. "Very good, Naruto-chan," chirped a proud Levi as she taught Naruto how to read. Naruto grinned up at the girl as his blue eyes sparkled. "Thank you, Levi," said the boy with a twist of the tongue. The boy had been learning to talk for the last week and he had been doing very well. Soon he would be able to have full conversations with people. Levi and Lucy, the two being the more academically achieved people of Fairy Tail, started to teach Naruto how to read and write. It turned out that Naruto was quite the genius, he absorbed everything the girls taught him like a sponge in water. In only 1 week he had almost caught up to the knowledge of a normal 6-year-old, which was astounding according to the girls' expectations. Erza chuckled as she sat next to Naruto. "Naruto-chan is learning these things much faster than Natsu ever did," muttered the young woman as she thought back to the time when she taught Natsu how to read properly. Natsu looked at his friend and dignified. "Hey!" exclaimed the young man a little embarrassed. "Naruto is not being threatened by a katana while he is reading, unlike me when you were teaching me." The S-class mage gave Natsu a look. "What?" The dragon slayer paled a little and quickly shook his head. "Nothing." Lucy ignored the sounds of the pink-haired young man and passed Naruto another book. take a look at this one, Naruto-chan. It was just a simple children's book that was in the fairy tale genre. I read this one when I was younger and it has always been one of my favorites. Chirped the blonde girl as she giggled at Naruto's smiling face. Thank you, Lucy. Spoke Naruto slowly with a steady voice. Levi raised an eyebrow at the title. Legend of the Shinobi, mumbled the blue-haired girl softly. I don't think I have ever read this one. Before I assume it is about ninjas. Lucy nodded at her best friend. Yep, it is about a world where many people were ninja and they would work in ninja villages to carry out missions. Explained the stellar mage with a smile on her face. This is actually the children's version of the story. There is an original version where it talks about a great war and one hero who saved humanity from total destruction. Lucy had a gleeful look on her face as she remembered how good the story was. I think I must have read the book 10 times overall. The storyline was epic and majestic. Swear to Kami, I fell in love with the main hero of the book. Erza crossed her arms with an interested expression on her face. Sounds interesting, maybe I'll give it a shot one day. Levi also nodded with a bright smile. Yeah, if Lu-chan loved it so much it must have been pretty good. Lucy smiled and nodded. I have a copy of the book at home, I'll bring it to you guys tomorrow. As the girls were chatting among themselves, Naruto opened the small picture book about shinobi. He saw men dressed in dark and masked attires as they jumped from tree to tree fighting their enemies. He noticed that all of them had a silver headband on their foreheads and for some reason, the boy kept staring at the headband. Naruto tilted his head to the side and thought for some reason the boy thought that he had seen those somewhere before. Levi saw Naruto had a confused look on his face and decided to help him. What is it, Naruto-chan, do you not get something? Naruto looked up at the three girls with a small pout as he pointed at the picture on the page. Right at the headband of the ninja in the book. Why is it blank? Asked the boy with a frown. Lucy didn't get what the boy was asking. Why is what blank, Naruto-chan? Naruto looked down at the page and pointed at the headband again. That way is it blank? Erza leaned closer to the boy and looked down at the page. Well, the headband is usually just for protection. The boy shook his head. Not here should be some mark on it. Levi scratched her head in confusion. What mark are you talking about? Naruto tried to think of the answer, but it was just not coming to him. I don't know. Before anyone could comment any further about the headband or some mark that was supposed to be on it, everyone suddenly felt very sleepy. Naruto yawned and rubbed his eyes as he automatically crawled onto Erza's lap and closed his eyes against her chest. Naruto was getting very sleepy and he didn't want to read anymore. Erza herself along with everyone else were starting to get real sleepy and one by one, all of them started to fall asleep right where they were. Erza sighed when she figured out what was happening and wrapped her arms around Naruto to hold him in place. Natsu, Levi and Lucy all fell asleep on the table shortly after. Makarov, who managed to stay awake, was sitting on the bar table with a rather serious look on his face. You're back, Mistaken. Groaned out the old man in a drowsy drone as his eyes looked back to see Murahin lying on the ground asleep. Do you really have to do that every time? Mistaken was one of the few S-ranked mages of Fairy Tail and was considered a potential strongest man in the guild. He wore a dark blue cloak and his arms and legs were mostly covered in wrapping bandages. He also wore a dark blue bandana with a silver forehead protector and a green mask that obscured the bottom half of his face. Hi master, muttered the man softly as he ripped off a request from the mission board. I'll be taking this one. Gigi, muttered a small childish voice from one of the tables and the two men looked over to see Naruto rubbing his eyes. Buddy was awake. Who is that? Asked the boy as he wiggled around in Erza's grasp. The boy was very sleepy but he wanted to see who the masked man was before he slept. Makarov and even the stoic Mistaken were shocked that the boy managed to stay awake after S-class mage casted a power sleeping spell. It was the first time the masked man had seen Naruto and he was even more surprised at the boy than the master. Even Erza and Murahin could withstand the power of the sleeping spell. How in the world of Earthland did the boy manage to resist the spell? Naruto rubbed his eyes and yawned. I'm sleepy. The master was in shock for a few seconds before he could utter out a sound. This is Mistaken, stuttered the old man, still shocked. He is one of the strongest mages in Fairy Tail. Makarov was getting more and more surprised at Naruto. Every time he thought he had the boy's power figured out there would be something new. But never had he thought that the boy would be able to resist a spell casted by Mistaken. It should be impossible. Mistaken nodded at the boy. Hello there. Naruto grinned and waved his small arms at the man. Hello Naruto. Greeted the boy as he leaned against Erza's arm to get a better look at Mistaken. You look weird. Both Makarov and Mistaken still couldn't believe what they were seeing and just slowly nodded. And nice to meet you, Naruto, muttered the man, quietly brushing off the slight insult as childish behavior. The man looked back at the master and asked a silent question through his eyes. Makarov sighed. He is a boy that Erza found on a mission about 2 weeks ago and he is quite the talented young fella. muttered the old man, tired, getting a little annoyed at the sleep spell. It seems that he is much more than what I expected, seeing that he can resist your sleep spell. Mystigan nodded silently. Yes, to resist my spell at his age is nothing short of astounding, muttered the man in thought before he turned back to his master. Well, I am off now, master. The master nodded as he continued to look at the smiling boy. Okay, undo the sleep spell. Mystigan nodded without looking back as he spoke. 54,321. At the end of the count, everyone abruptly woke up in surprise. Erza's arms flinched a little as she woke up and she pulled Naruto closer to her when she saw him smiling up at her. Natsu, Lucy, and Levi all woke up in turn. Levi sighed as she rubbed her eyes to rid herself of any remaining drowsiness. One by one the entire guild woke up and people started to pick themselves up from the floor or the stairs in some cases. Natsu grunted in annoyance as he patted his face. I hate it when that happens. Lucy groaned and looked around at her friends. What was that? Did someone cast a sleep spell on all of us? Erza sighed and nodded. It was Mystigan, one of the most powerful mages in Fairy Tail, said the strongest female mage seriously. Every time he comes in to get a new mission he would put a sleep spell on every one of her. Some reason he is very secretive about his face and doesn't want anyone in the guild to see him. The blonde girl looked surprised. That is way too suspicious. Levi giggled and nodded. Yeah, no one here has ever seen his face, the only one who knows what he looks like is the master. Well, I know his face too, announced a loud voice on the second floor of the guild building. The master and all others looked up to see another S-class mage of Fairy Tail. Laxus, exclaimed Elfman when he saw the tall man. You're back, this is a surprise. Laxus was a very tall and muscular young man with grey eyes. His hair was slicked back, its numerous spiky strands pointed backwards, though some of it fell down on his forehead. He had a distinctive lightning-shaped scar on his right eye. He was dressed in black pants, a purple buttoned-up shirt, and a long thick coat that he let draped over his shoulders. Mystigan is quite a shy guy, just let him be, okay, muttered the man with a smirk on his face. But I am not the only one who knows what he looks like. The kid Erza is holding was awake too. What? Exclaimed most people in the guild in unison as they all looked over at the young boy. Erza was in shock too as she looked down at the boy in her arms. Is this true, Naruto-chan? Naruto was just reading through his book and looked up at the other cluelessly. What? Asked the boy, confused as he tilted his head to the side. Makarov sighed and looked up at his guild members. Yes, Naruto was awake when Mystigan walked in and introduced them. Erza and the other girls looked at Naruto in shock as Natsu giddily jumped over to the boy. Wow, Naruto, what did he look like? Asked the fire mage with glee in his eyes, as many others also listened in to see if the boy would answer. Naruto giggled as he looked back at Natsu. He looked weird. Many people just faulted at the answer and the people in Naruto's table just sweat dropped. Natsu was laughing as he patted Naruto's head. The little guy was getting better and better in his eyes. The Dragon Slayer had gotten quite a bit closer to the boy in the past week and had started to treat him like a little brother of a sort. Laxus chuckled and crossed his arms together. Well, it is good to know that kids nowadays are getting stronger unlike the pathetic ones that I used to know, muttered the young man as he signaled to Natsu and Gray. Natsu growled and jumped up on the table. Damn you, Laxus, come down and fight me. Many people cringed at the thought of fighting Laxus and the man himself just chuckled. No thank you, it is boring when your opponent can't even land one hit on you, mocked Laxus before he suddenly disappeared with a bolt of lightning and appeared right next to Natsu. Challenge me 20 years later. Erza stood up and glared at Laxus. Shut up, Laxus, you are far too arrogant. Laxus smirked over at Erza. I am the strongest in Fairy Tail, not Mystigan, not you, announced the young man in a condescending manner. This is not arrogance, this is the Treadhand. Calling me arrogant is being arrogant yourself, Erza. The female S-class mage was almost ready to attack Laxus for his claims. Just accept it, finished Laxus as he disappeared with a flash. Levi frowned and shook her head. What a jerk. Naruto was standing at the table in a daze after seeing the flash of yellow that Laxus created. It reminded him of something again. Ignoring Laxus for the moment, Erza focused on a more important development. How did you manage to stay awake, Naruto-chan? Asked the young woman as she sat Naruto on her lap. I thought her were very sleepy before. Naruto looked up at Erza with his big blue eyes full of wonder. I was sleepy but I wanted to see the masked man. Murahan, who was listening in to the conversation, walked over and patted Naruto's head. Wow, Naru-chan resisted Mystigan's spell. Praised the pin-up model, surprised. Not even you and I can do that, said Murahan as she looked at Erza, who nodded back in agreement. Gray crossed his arms and looked down at the boy seriously. But how is that possible? Naruto can't have more magical power than us. The master had joined the group and stood on the table beside Naruto. It is not so much as the volume of magical power, said the old man as the table gave him their undivided attention. It seems that Naruto's magical power is much more potent than normal people's, and he is able to resist charm spells that Mystigan uses. The others were astonished that Naruto had so much talent and potential. If he really masters his power, he would be unstoppable. I have never seen such resilient and potent magical power. Before don't know if we can even call it magic anymore. Erza was concerned and wrapped her arms around Naruto. What do you mean, master? Makarov sighed and crossed his arms in thought. Magic is the physical embodiment of the spirit. When the physical spirit of an organism connects with the spiritual flow of nature, the spirit forms magic as a product of the connection. The other nodded at the master's definition of magic. Magical power is the product us being connected to nature, but it seems that Naruto has a power deep within him that he produces himself and it is very powerful. Murahan looked a little worried along with the others. So will he even be able to use magic, or can he only use techniques that his power can do? Asked a white-haired beauty with concern. Like that clone thing Naru-chan can do. Makarov shrugged. There is only one way to find out. Erza, along with everyone around him, suddenly looked down at the boy peacefully reading his book. Sensing the stares, Naruto peered away from the page and looked up at the group. What? Asked the boy as he turned to Erza. Chan. Erza smirked and lifted Naruto into her arms. Come on Naruto-chan, I'll teach you some magic. Naruto brightened and smiled. Really? Erza, along with everyone at the table, made their way to the backyard of the guild and set Naruto down in the middle. Most children of Fairy Tail, including Erza, had trained and honed their magical abilities in the same field. It was fitting that Erza teach Naruto magic there. The master, along with Natsu, Happy, Gray, Lucy, Murahan, Levi and Elfman all stood to the side as they observed how Naruto will take to Erza's teachings. From what Natsu and Gray remembered, Erza would be a very scary teacher. So what type of magic are you going to teach Naruto, Erza? Asked the master from the sideline. Erza smirked as a sword appeared in her hands. What else? Me speciality, of course. Natsu's eyes widened. You are teaching him requip? Exclaimed the young man. Isn't that a little hard for a kid? Erza grinned and shook her head. Not requip, I'm just going to teach Naruto-chan some plain sword magic. Said the young woman as she knelt down and handed Naruto one of her many katanas carefully. Here Naruto-chan, try holding this careful, it is sharp and heavy. The boy reached out to grab the hilt of the sword and pulled it from Erza's stretched out arms. Katana. Mumbled Naruto as he lifted the blade up without any apparent difficulty. The katana was a regular steel katana forged at high heat. The blade was a brilliant silver and the hilt was black with gold diamond patterns. Erza smiled as the others were slightly shocked. Wow, Naruto is quite strong for his age and size. Muttered Natsu as he eyed the heavy-looking sword. The master nodded. Yes, that katana is at least 20 pounds, for a kid like Naruto to lift it is quite something. Erza smiled at Naruto's talent and patted the boy on the head. Okay Naruto-chan, I know you can already feel the energy inside you. Said the red-haired beauty. This is just like when you made your clonistry to focus all your power into the sword and slash it down to the ground. Naruto nodded. Okay, Chan mumbled the boy as he held the blade with both hands and stared at it. Naruto could still remember the power he felt when he attacked Irigur a while ago and he tried to find the same power inside his body. The boy knew where his power wash could always feel it and all he needed to do was to draw it out like before. Remember Naruto, you have to grind the two sides together to make the wind sharper. Naruto suddenly had a vision of a bearded man explaining something to him and somehow that made him remember what to do with a katana. Erza and the other all watched in astonishment as a light hum filled the air as the katana in Naruto's hands was covered in a blue buzzing aura. Naruto had covered the blade with some sort of energy and it looked to be quite powerful. The energy was flaring and grinding against the blade like the teeth on a chainsaw and it was becoming faster and stronger by the second. Focus power into the blade, muttered Naruto, repeating what Erza said before as he lifted the blade higher into the air. And slash it down to the ground. Hazajiri no Jutsu. Naruto had another vision, this time was a blonde girl who had tied her hair into 4 ponytails and she was sending blades of wind out from her giant fan. Naruto acted on muscle memory and slashed the blade down swiftly and as the blade traveled towards the ground, a crescent blade of semi-transparent wind slashed out from the swing and blasted towards the far side of the training field. The spectator watched in shock as the blade of wind traveled at blinding speeds and eventually sliced through a very large tree. The blade sliced clean through the large trunk of the tree and it toppled over to the ground. Erza's jaw dropped of the sight. What the hell? Muttered the girl as she ignored the loud thud the tree made when it fell to the ground. All the others were just as shocked as Erza, even the master had widened eyes. Holy kami. Naruto had a bright smile on his face as he pointed over to the tree as he jumped up and down in joy. Wow, did you see that? Erza chuckled still in shock as she knelt down to the boy and grabbed the katana from him. That was great Naruto-chan, I am so proud of you. mumbled the girl almost sheepishly as she kept looking at the destruction the boy had made with only one simple swing with one simple katana. Naruto giggled and ran to hug Erza. "That was awesome, Er-chan," cried the boy happily. "Let me do that again." "No," cried everyone besides Erza in unison as they walked closer to the boy. Lucy, Levi and Murahin all surrounded Naruto with Erza. "That is enough for one day, Naru-chan," said Murahin still in a little bit of shock. Levi nodded along and patted the boy's head. "But that was amazing, Naruto-chan." Lucy's sweat dropped as she poked Naruto's confused face. "Anymore, there would be no trees left here." Naruto looked at all the girls surrounding him with wonder and just nodded after a while. The boy didn't understand why everyone was acting so strangely, he thought using the katana was really fun and he wanted to make more wind things to slash through trees. Naruto pouted and looked visibly disappointed about not using the katana anymore and eventually just leaned into Erza. Erza wrapped her arms around Naruto and lifted him up as she shared astonished looks with her fellow female mages. Gray shakily looked over to Natsu, who was equally appalled. "What the hell, how did the kid do that?" Natsu, who was holding Happy, shrugged lightly. "I wish I knew," muttered the shocked young man. "Do you think Naruto can teach me how to do that?" Elfman looked at Natsu with an incredulous expression. "Are you nuts? I don't think Naruto knows how he did that himself." Murahin walked back to the group of men and looked down at the master. "Master, do you know what kind of magic was that?" asked the girl as everyone listened in. Makarov looked serious as he stared over at the fall tree. "That felt like wind magic, but again, it felt different. That one I have felt before just doesn't feel like magic," said the old man as he looked at Naruto, who was trying to sleep in Erza's arms. But Naruto seemed to have done that naturally, so it may be something that he just instinctively knows how to do, just like his clones. Natsu walked over to Erza and patted Naruto's back. "This kid really have some weird powers," said the Dragon Slayer with a smile on his face. Lucy nodded at her partner's words and looked down at the boy. "If he is this powerful, know how strong will he be when he is back to his original form?" Gray chuckled and stuck his hands in his pockets. "He's going to be a monster, maybe right up there with Laxus and Mystigan," mused the ice mage as the others smiled at the thought. While Gray was only joking, the master was seriously thinking that Naruto would even surpass Laxus and Mystigan. "There is something with this boy, is not a normal human child," thought the old man deep in thought. "His power is incredible for a boy his age, even Laxus didn't have that much power when he was 6 years old and he had Dragon Lacrima implanted into him." Makarov physically shuddered at the thought of Naruto unlocking all of his powers. This boy might be in the League of Gildarts. Erza got over her shock and was surprisingly filled with excitement. "Okay, Naruto-chan," exclaimed the S-class mage as the boy looked back up at her when he heard her voice. "Starting tomorrow I will teach you everything I know in swordsmanship, and when you age again you will be stronger than Natsu and Gray." Natsu and Gray instantly reacted and stepped towards Erza. "What, the kid can't be stronger than us?" cried the two with odd uniformity. Erza just ignored the two and started her way back to the guild. "Are you hungry, Naruto-chan? Let's get you something to eat," chirped the red-haired beauty as she kissed Naruto on the cheek. "Ramen!" cried Naruto happily. Natsu and Gray continued to look at Erza, expecting some sort of reaction. "She just plain ignored us," thought the two mages, feeling a little hurt. The other girls just giggled at Natsu and Gray before they followed Erza and Naruto back to the guild building. Lucy looked back at Natsu and just patted him on the head like a puppy, giggling at the look on his face. "Come on, Happy, let's get some lunch," said the stellar mage as the cat climbed onto her shoulder. "Let's get some fish," cried Happy loudly. Elfman and the master followed the group back to the building. "Money need a drink," muttered the old man as Elfman nodded along, sake sounded really good at the moment. Natsu and Gray were the only two left on the field. Everyone just left. Yeah. Prophecy Rebirth Chapter 7. Erza was not having a good week, in fact, it was just downright horrible. A week ago, Natsu, along with Happy and Lucy, had stolen a S-class quest from the second floor request board, which was bad enough. Then Gray, who was sent by the master to bring the group back to Fairy Tail, ended up becoming an accomplice and joined in on the mission. Erza, being the only one present and the only one willing, had to go out to bring the group of fools back to the guild, given that they were still alive. The Galuna Island request had been up in the request board for a while already, but no S-class mages have taken it yet, and the reason was quite clear. It was a very dangerous mission, and Erza was going to complete it along with Mystigan or Laxus, but she ended up finishing the mission with a trio of idiots. "We're sorry, Erza, but can you please tell me what sort of punishment the master will give us?" begged a nervous Lucy as she walked beside Erza heading back to the guild. "It must be horrible seeing that Gray and Natsu are freaking out." Erza smirked and sent Lucy a rather evil look. "I will not tell you, I'll just enjoy the punishment you all deserve." Natsu was shivering a little, and Gray was growing more pale by the second. I don't want to go through that again, mumbled the dragon slayer as he looked towards the direction of the guild with utter anguish. Gray could only nod along with his friend as he mind-forced him to replay the punishment he received last time. Kamame, we should run away while we can. Erza chuckled and looked back at the catatonic group. If any of you try to run now, I will carry out the punishment for the master, and I promise you all that I will be even more cruel and terrifying. Lucy and Happy nodded as the other two just looked down at the ground. We won't run, whimpered out a scared Happy. Erza grunted as turned her sights back to the direction of the guild. She could still remember how much she wanted to stay in the guild a week ago. She was enjoying teaching Naruto swordsmanship and controlling his peculiar magic, but no, she had to go out and save a bunch of idiots from getting killed on a mission that was out of their league. Just thinking about it made Erza mad again. The S-class mage sighed as she wondered how Naruto was doing. Erza had left the boy in the care of Murahin, seeing that her best friend was the one Naruto was closest to besides herself. Erza didn't really want to let Murahin have Naruto for the week, seeing that the other S-class mage always tried to make Naruto like her better, and it would fill Erza with anger. Erza knew that she was the closest to Naruto out of everyone in the guild, and a week won't change that, but she didn't like how Murahin would try to interfere with their lovely relationship. Erza had honestly never been as close to anyone as she was to Naruto. He had become one of the most important people in her life. Erza found herself constantly thinking about what will happen when Naruto returns to his original state. Will he still be this close to me? Will he still need me so much? Will he still love me? These questions haunted Erza's mind like a virus, and soon she became nervous about Naruto returning to normal. Erza had lost some of her precious people before, and she didn't want to lose Naruto, as well it would hurt more than even before when she lost Old Man Rob and Jel. Well, we're home, muttered Lucy as she approached the guild, desperately hoping that the master was not present at the moment. Erza was the only one with a smile on her face as the group walked into the guild. She actually sped up as she got closer to the door. She really wanted to see Naruto sooner. "Er-chan," cried a loud voice as a blur ran up to Erza and wrapped its arms around her like a vice grip. "You're back." Erza instantly had a smile on her face as she lifted the boy up into her arms and hugged him close to her chest. "Hey Naruto-chan, I missed you," muttered the woman as she made her way further into the guild. The other members of Fairy Tail smiled at the sight of Erza and Naruto. The love and care between them were clear and obvious. It was endearing to see them being so close to each other. Murahin walked up to the group with her usual sweet smile. "Welcome home everyone," greeted the white-haired beauty. Erza smiled at her best friend as she lifted Naruto higher in her arms. "Thank you for looking after Naruto while I was gone, Mira." The smile on Murahin became brighter as she waved Erza off. "It was no problem at all, I love having Naru-chan at home with us," said the girl with a light giggle. Elfman was having quite a bit of fun trying to explain to Naruto what a man is. Lucy, who momentarily forgot about her impending punishment, smiled at the thought. How did Naruto-chan take it? Erza nodded along at the question, silently plotting to beat Elfman to a pulp if he ever managed to infect Naruto with his stupid manly philosophies. Murahin giggled and patted Naruto's head. "This little guy pretty much zoned out after the first few minutes of Elfman's lessons," explained the beauty icon of Fairy Tail. "Naruto spent a week practicing his reading, writing, and magic." Erza smiled proudly at the boy and kissed the top of his head. "That's good, did he improve much on his magic?" Murahin nodded with her hands on her hips. "I'll say," chirped the barmaid happily. "Naru-chan can pretty much control his clones now and could use his wind blade whenever he wants." Before Erza had left, she had officially given one of her own katanas to Naruto as a present, and the boy hugged her tightly for that. It was the same katana Naruto used a few days ago, and he had been training to use it with Murahin and the master since Erza had gone on her week-long mission. Both the master and Murahin had to admit that Naruto was very talented, and not only because of his latent hidden powers. The boy seemed to be very intelligent academically and magically. The master would only have to explain to Naruto once on whatever subject, and the boy would understand almost right away. In a week, Naruto had become quite adept at using his katana, and Murahin was certain that in a few years' growth, Naruto would become one of the strongest members in Fairy Tail. Natsu grinned as he ruffled Naruto's hair. "Hey Naruto, maybe we should spar later." Erza scoffed and turned away so Naruto couldn't see Natsu. "No way, not only do you tend to go overboard in a spar, you still have to receive your punishment from the master," said the S-class mage as she turned back to face the group. "And that includes all of you?" Murahin giggled. "Actually, the master just left yesterday for a guildmaster meeting, he won't be back until tomorrow." "Yes," cried Natsu and Gray as they high-fived each other. "Save for another day," said Gray much happier than before. Lucy sighed as she held Happy in her arms. "I still want to know what the punishment will be." Naruto wiggled in Erza's arms and looked up at her. "Can we go home, Er-chan?" asked the boy with a small yawn. Erza smiled and nodded at the boy. Sure Naruto-chan, let's go home. The red-haired beauty still had a lot of luggage to bring back to Fairy Hills and she wanted to have a nice rest after such a long and arduous mission. Mira, I'm going to take Naruto-chan home for the day, is that okay? Murahan nodded with her perpetual smile. Of course it is, I'll drop by later to bring you Naruto-chan's things. Erza smiled. Thanks. Erza was the head girl of Fairy Hills and she was also the one member who had rented out the most rooms out of the dormitory. Because of Erza's mass amount of armors and weapons, she had to rent 5 rooms in order to fit them all inside. But since a few weeks ago, Erza had emptied out most things in her own room to make space for Naruto's things. The boy had his own small bed, a space where he would play with his toys, and even his own weapon stand. The weapon stand only had one katana in it, but Erza planned to teach Naruto to use all sorts of weapons, so buying the stand was just thinking ahead. Thinking back about Naruto's small bed, it had only been used about 3 times. Most of the time, Naruto would sleep right beside Erza on her bed. The first few times were Naruto climbing into Erza's bed into middle of the night and after that Erza just kept Naruto in her bed since he would just climb in later either way. Did you have fun staying with Mira, Naruto-chan? Asked Erza with a happy smile on her face. Naruto smiled and nodded. Yep, Mirani and Elf Nai are very fun. Chirped the boy happily. Mirani cooked me some good ramen every day. Erza chuckled at Naruto's ramen addiction. I'll cook you some ramen later, okay? The boy looked up at Erza with his eyes widened. Okay. Erza smiled as she walked into Fairy Hills for the first time in a week, she was happy to finally be home. The S-class mage had lived in Fairy Hills since she arrived at Fairy Tail, and it had been her home ever since. It was a very clean and cozy place, and the people living in the dorms were also Erza's close friends as well. There were Levi, Biska, Lucky, living right beside her, and they have all been there since way back. Then Murahan moved in as well since Elfman had decided to be more of a man and moved out to his own apartment. Though Murahan would often sleep over at her brother's place and she stayed at his place the whole of last week with Naruto. Erza had a smile on her face as she walked into her room and let out a sigh of relaxation. I'm finally home, muttered the powerful girl as she placed Naruto down on the ground. Naruto giggled and ran to his own part of the apartment. Yay! Cried the boy as he grabbed his toy sword and flung it around. Erza had prohibited Naruto from using his real katana in the house, seeing that his powers would probably destroy the whole building in a few minutes. Erza giggled at the cute boy as she re-equipped into her castle clothes instead of her Heart Crew's armor and tied her long hair into a ponytail. Come here Naruto-chan, let her-chan see you. Said the young woman as she sat down on her usual couch and let the boy run into her arms. Naruto had a bright smile on his face as his blue eyes twinkled with joy at seeing his favorite person again. Erza kissed Naruto on the forehead and ruffled his hair. I missed you a lot, Naruto-chan. I missed her-chan too. Exclaimed the boy, waved his arms around in Erza's lap. Erza smiled and hugged Naruto closer. Do you like training with your katana? Naruto wrapped his arms around Erza's neck and nodded against her chest. Yep, it's fun. Chirped the boy as he looked back up. But I like it more when Er-chan teach me. The red-haired beauty smiled and nodded. Well, starting tomorrow I will be teaching you again. Naruto fiddled around and reached over for a book that was on a coffee table next to the couch. Can Er-chan read me this again? Asked the boy holding his favorite book. Erza giggled. Sure, but aren't you tired Naruto-chan, do you want a nap first? The blonde boy yawned and rubbed his eyes. No, I want to read. Muttered Naruto softly as he laid his head sideways on Erza's shoulder. The S-class mage sighed and lifted the boy as she stood up. We are taking a nap first. Erza hummed in relaxation as she laid down on her comfortable bed and held Naruto close to her. The boy instinctively snuggled into Erza and rested his head on her pillow. Erza smiled at the boy as she too rested down on the pillow. She noticed that Naruto's height was still the same from a week ago, his body was just long enough so that his feet would sometimes tickle her stomach. Erza hugged the boy close to her as she closed her eyes, nuzzling her face in his soft and spiky hair. Naruto wiggled a little in Erza's arms, half asleep. I love you, Er-chan, mumbled the boy as he planted a sloppy kiss on Erza's cheek. Good night. Erza's eyes widened at the boy's words and felt a rising surge of happiness from within her heart. I love you too, Naruto-chan. Erza couldn't describe the peculiar feeling in her heart at the moment. All she knew was that she felt incredibly happy and loved. After being separated from Naruto for the whole week, an involuntary desire to see him again built up in Erza's heart and it had become even greater than she had imagined. The boy had become the most important person in her life in a very short time and Erza herself couldn't explain why. Naruto was a very cute kid, but that was not enough to make Erza so crazy about him. There was something else that had been pulling Erza closer and closer to Naruto, but she had no idea what. The S-class mage pondered wildly in her mind, trying to figure out why she loved the boy so much. Erza thought it was perhaps her motherly instincts, but she quickly scratched that thought, it was certainly not it. Erza had taken care of many kids Naruto's age before, whether it was Romeo or on babysitting jobs when she was younger, and none of those kids had ever made her feel so peculiar. After a few more minutes of thinking, Erza sighed and shook her head. I don't care anymore, all I know is that Naruto-chan is very important to me. Naruto mumbled in his sleep and snuggled deeper against Erza's chest. Here-chan. Erza giggled and nested Naruto's head in the crook of her neck. I'm right here. The boy continued to wiggle around. Ramen. Before Erza could say any more, several knocks on her door took her attention away from the sleeping boy. That must be Mira, thought the red-haired beauty as she slowly and quietly got out of Naruto's grasp and tiptoed to the door. On the way to the door, Erza could help but turn back to look at the cute boy. Naruto was laying fully on his back with his arms and legs spread out to the side and had the slightest snoring sound coming from his lips. With a giggle, Erza opened her door and was delighted to see her best friend standing in front of her. Hey Mira. Greeted Erza with a hushed tone as she led her friend inside. Murahin smiled at the sight of the sleeping Naruto and walked over to Erza's couch. Naru-chan is tired, huh? Asked the model as she sat down lightly. Erza smiled and nodded as she sat down beside Murahin. Yeah, he didn't want to go to bed, but he was too tired. The white-haired beauty giggled as she lifted a bag she was carrying onto the coffee table. Here are Naru-chan's stuff, I washed them already this morning. Erza smiled at her friend's thoughtfulness. Thanks a lot, Mira. Murahin just waved her best friend off. No problem at all, said the girl as she looked over at Naruto. So, have you noticed it yet? The S-class mage rose an eyebrow in question. Notice what? Murahin looked surprised and pointed over at the sleeping boy. Naru-chan's magical power has gone up a lot since a week ago. Erza was surprised and quickly looked over to sense the boy's energy. Yeah, muttered the young woman. That is a huge difference compared to a week ago. The model nodded seriously. I know, you should see his wind blades. No, a boy his age should not have power like that, said Murahin as Erza looked at her a little worried. With one swing, Naru-chan can cast a huge blade of wind and one of them can probably butt through several trees at once. Erza's eyes widened. Wow, that's much stronger than before. Murahin sighed. Yeah, I told him to never use his katana unless either one of us are with him. Erza immediately agreed with her friend with a nod. Naru-chan is a smart boy, but he is still only 6 years old and doesn't have the necessary knowledge to know how dangerous his attacks would be around people. The red-haired woman sighed and crossed her arms. If Naruto-chan's wind blades can do so much damage, I wouldn't be surprised if he can already beat some of the members in the guild. Murahin shook her head. Not only that, since Naru-chan's magical power had grown so much, I think he will regain a few years again soon, said the girl as Erza looked a little sad. Purusuka-san did say that the more power Naru-chan gains back, the more his body would change to adapt it, so he should grow again soon. Erza looked down a little. Yeah. The barmaid frowned and wrapped her arms around her best friend. Erza-chan, what's the matter? Erza shook her head and looked up at Murahin. It's just that when Naruto-chan regains his true self, what will I be to him? Muttered the normally powerful girl looking fragile. Naruto-chan has become very important to me, what if he just doesn't need me anymore? Murahin rubbed Erza's arms tenderly. Don't be silly, Erza-chan, you know that Naru-chan loves you more than anything. Comforted the white-haired girl with a smile. I don't know what is in his old memories, but in his new ones, you are in almost every frame and you are the one person that is the closest to him. Erza sighed and nodded. I know that, but Naruto-chan is going to be our age soon and he won't need me to take care of him like a child anymore, said the S-class mage softly. I'll miss the child Naruto and I don't know what my relationship will be like with adult Naruto. Murahin had honestly never seen Erza in such a vulnerable state, she must have really grown to love Naruto. No matter what, you will always be a very important person in Naru-chan's heart, that I am sure of, exclaimed the model with conviction. I could always tell that what you have with Naruto is something very special, don't know what it is yet, but I know that no matter what, you two will be together. The red-haired beauty giggled as she smiled up at her best friend. You make it sound like that Naruto-chan and I are going to be a couple when he reverts back to his original age. Murahin winked with a giggle. Maybe I am saying just that. Erza looked at her friend like she was crazy. You both love each other, although not romantically yet, but one day it might happen. Erza chuckled and shook her head. I see you have a crazy imagination, just like Lucy. Murahin playfully slapped Erza's arm. You laugh about it now, sooner or later, you'll see that I'm right. Erza stared at the other S-class mage like she was crazy. That's just crazy. The fairy tale model smirked and crossed her arms. Put it this way, would you like it if Naruto fell for another girl and no longer needed you? Erza was silent as Murahin stood up and walked over to the door. I'll see you later Erza-chan, you need to gather your thoughts. With that, the girl left with a wink. Erza shook her head as she walked back over to her bed. Damn Mira, such a delusional idiot. Muttered the young mage as she lied back down and looked at the sleeping boy. I don't love Naruto-chan like that. Unknown to anyone in Fairy Tail, a lone shadow was lurking in the darkest of Magnolia Town, patiently waiting for sundown. The man had a deranged grin on his face as he stared at Fairy Tail's guild with predatory eyes. War was about to be declared on Fairy Tail, and whether they like it or not, they will have to make a choice. What if Naruto and Erza child in Fairy Tail end here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.